I think we're recording.
We are.
Let's go.
We aren't against police. We aren't against police work, but we are against those thugs. It's the weekend to take.
I appreciate the I word.
I understood that reference.
Yeah. It's the weekend to take. Back again. Another ridiculous intro by your man, Dr. Lewis.
Not the
third, baby.
Third? Oh, y'all do it at the same time now, so it's weird. But Daniel, you have multiple days in between this one to go fix this. I don't understand how you keep getting this wrong, man.
I ponder it. I sit alone in my room thinking about this, but the more I think about it, you truly are the third.
Please explain. Please detour into this ridiculous.
Actually, on my screen, I got Terrell Huff 1, me 2, the third, and then Daniel's at 4.
I'm just saying, there's signs everywhere, man. You know what I'm saying?
Well, like you got Derek Lewis, the UFC fighter.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And then there's got to be another Derek Lewis out there.
At least one.
That's two. And then after that, it's you.
No, there's another famous Derek Lewis.
That's good though. Third?
Terrell's right. Actually,
you're probably like the third friend I ever made, I think. So I'm pretty sure that's correct somewhere. Possibly. Revisit history.
Not watching via YouTube.
Please continue with the introduction.
Well, we went on a major tangent there, but that's fine. That's what we do here. The person who always gets my name wrong, Daniel Davison, he is here.
Yeah.
Yo!
Yo!
Thespian Poppy himself has returned as well. Terrell Huff, say hi to the people.
Indeed, sir.
Double indeed, triple indeed. And then, of course, my arch nemesis. I don't even know why he's still here. Austin Brazina.
What up, big fella?
I'll get you someday.
What up, big fella?
What up, big fella?
So we're all in the building again. Another episode. We finally back last week. Hope you guys listened to that episode. It was, I think, it was a little disjointed because of the new format, but it was still really good on content. We had our boy, the real third, Ed White, Trey Blanco. He came and tore it up.
Trey Blanco
with his grill. And so, if you listen to this one, you didn't listen to that one, please go back because it was an important episode, and I think it was a good episode despite us in the new format here. Today we're gonna keep it moving because this never stops. We thought we were gonna kind of have a nice little just purely sports one today because the NBA is coming back, and then of course Kyrie Irving got into the mix and kind of took us down a path. And so
path right off the edge of the earth.
It'd be like that sometimes.
Yes, the Mr. Flat Earther himself took us right over the edge. Before we get into any more of that, I've already messed up. I've already said too much. We have to hit him with Terrell's first take. Before we can even get into the subject, Terrell likes to talk about things that you may or may not know about at that moment in time because that's just how he does. He likes to talk. He's a talker. And so this is Terrell Huff's first take, sponsored by J&T Charters, official charters of the Memphis Grizzlies. Terrell.
Well, I'll keep it brief this time. Kyrie, I know, right?
Don't let him talk shit.
And I know there's a contingent of other players, and apparently, from reading the article not too long ago, apparently it's not just NBA players. Apparently, there's according to what he said, and the statement that this contingent of athletes and entertainers and whatnot put out. Apparently, there's quite a few of them, as in hundreds, the way that it's written. And, there's this idea that, we are trying to focus on social injustice or social justice and things of that nature. And my biggest concern is guess what? You can do both. The NBA has kind of been at the forefront the last several years when it's come to like, for instance, you kind of saw it kick up a lot when there was that intersection of Eric Garner and his murder in New York, and it kind of was right along on the heels of the situation that happened with Donald Sterling and the whole issue with the Clippers and some things that he had said on some phone calls, and he kind of got exposed and he got put on blast because he was a little sloppy with the ladies. Now, that being said, the NBA has kind of been at the forefront of some of this stuff, and they really have been a lot more forward with it than the other leagues are, for obvious reasons when you look at, the majority of their fan base. So that's not surprising. but that's also the same reason why I'm actually kind of not really understanding Kyrie's standpoint. What I see is a guy that's making a lot of money, basically saying, hey, you know what? I don't know if I'm ready to play right now. And I get the Florida part of it because Florida is kind of a hot mess right now when it's coming to coronavirus. But that being said, when I look at the overall, I'm still not understanding after reading the story. I'm still not 100% understanding how the social justice and the protests and just bringing light to the subject. I don't understand how that can't be done while they play or while they're, you know, however that process works out. You can argue about where the games are going to happen and the safety of that, but I don't understand how this part even came into it. So my first take on this is you're going to have to do a little bit more explaining for me, Kyrie. David Wesley, I think, is also – not David Wesley. I'm sorry. What's the kid from L.A.?
I was like, is it the
You know
90s?
what my brain is. The kid what is it?
No, I was just laughing.
From
at
the Lakers or the Clippers?
No, it was he played for the Celtics, and then he ended up with the Lakers. He played for the Celtics, and he actually played himself into a nice little contract, but then he bounced around a little bit after that. But I can't remember his name. I apologize. But basically, the two of them were the face of this sort of like, we're not ready to go back and play. Don't try to force us to go back and play kind of a thing. And so those two guys kind of got together. But they're also, like I said, two guys that have probably got Kyrie especially from a money standpoint. You know, when you think about the fact that probably 98% of the league doesn't make the kind of money he makes,
Right.
saying let's not play, you know, because we've got social justice that we need to worry about and we got to do this. It's sad because it kind of puts it in a light where it's like, oh, great, now we got to pick between playing basketball and being social justice warriors. And it's like, you can do both, dude. Like, we've seen this in the NBA. So that's kind of my first take on it is like, dude, I don't understand. You can do both. Y'all been doing both. It really is just a matter of, especially when you consider the NBA probably supports it more than any other league. So realistically, and I know there's some issues in regards to like standing for the national anthem and stuff like that. I know that is something that supposedly you have to do in the NBA, but at the same time, you know, we've seen whether it's the clothes that they wear, whether it's the statement that they make visually during it. The point is that they've been given more avenues to get their opinions out and to bring light to certain subjects. They've been given way more avenues and way more leeway than other leagues have. So the idea that you can only have one with the other is, I don't understand that. So that's kind of how I feel about it. Is it sounds a little bit odd to me that he's all of a sudden feeling like they can't do both.
Were you talking about?
Yeah, don't know what. You said Lou Will?
Were you talking about Lou Williams?
No, although Lou Williams has been pretty vocal in his own way. He's a backup guard for the Lakers. Defensive guy, really good defender. Years back with the Celtics, he was that dude. I literally just had to.
Avery Bradley.
Avery.
There you go. Yeah, Bradley. Yeah.
Avery Bradley was the other guy. He's with the Lakers now. And like I said,
alum.
these are guys that
Texas great.
Huh?
The Texas great.
Oh, he did play for Texas.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's the proper reaction when you mention Avery Bradley played for Texas.
I mean, if you watch college basketball, you would know him.
Yeah, no, I mean, I knew of him. It's just I couldn't remember the name, and I don't know why David Wesley was even in my head. Like, I have no idea why.
Because you've been watching too much Jordan documentaries and your mindset is completely locked into the 90s. I don't know, man. David Wesley's way back. That's a way back machine right there. You're showing your age, bro.
Probably so, man. Hey, man, the 90s
better times,
bro. You understand?
So anyway,
but yeah. The only way I could see why Kyrie would think this is like a actual issue is because maybe if the game starts and people will focus only on the games, not really on the issues anymore. Like, okay, well, we can distract ourselves by just going back to sports now because, you know, most of America loves sports. A lot of white America loves sports. So maybe they're like, okay, well, all the sports isn't going on. Maybe I can watch something else because there's like sports on that I can watch.
Yeah.
And maybe Kyrie feels that they don't want to give them that out because, you know, if we don't play, then y'all have to sit there and listen. Right. Which, I mean, it's kind of a stretch because people can still watch other things if they want to. my thing is kind of like you were saying, Terrell, is like you have such a huge platform in terms of sports that people are going to watch sports. So if you do types of protest things, commercials and stuff for Black Lives Matter, for police brutality during an NBA game or during timeouts and stuff, then people will have to watch that, and more people probably will watch that as well because, you know, people want to watch sports. So that doesn't mean you still can't do demonstrations and such during the game. Another thing is kind of like you said, is that he is that elite of elite in terms of the amount of money he makes. So if he misses the rest of the games, he's probably like, oh, I still have savings of, you know, whatever millions of dollars. When I kind of saw an article or a quote today from Ed Davis, he's actually a center for the Utah Jazz. He's been in the league for, I think, like maybe 10 years, maybe more than that. So he has a lot of money too. But he was saying that, yeah, most of these guys, they need to go back to start playing because they're probably hurting by now, missing all these games. I think it's about maybe like $30,000 are losing the game that they don't play. And a lot of these younger guys or who are just new in the league, they don't have the mega millions. They need to, you know, save the money. They're probably paying for their family or other type of stuff too. The younger stars, he mentioned like, what's his name? Donovan Mitchell. He's going to be up for a contract extension. So if these games don't get played, it might affect the cap for next year. So while he could be making 160 million, he might be making now 90 million. So, I mean, I know it's a lot of money either way, but still, in terms of being able to do what you want to do, that are two different numbers, right? Yeah.
Especially when the goal for some of the smarter athletes in any league, some of the smarter athletes, they're thinking generational wealth, and they're thinking of ways that they can make sure that, hey, if I have a kid and my kid isn't a professional athlete, you know, what can I do to make sure the money's there for them to be able to do what they want to do and you know, not have to be concerned with whether or not they can dribble or shoot or whatever. And the other aspect of it is that a lot of people don't think about the fact that these guys make, you could talk about how much money they make overall, but people don't realize they make a game check, as in they get a check per game. You know what I'm saying?
Per game.
But when you think about the fines, when you think about all that stuff, they get per game checks. So that's a big this. And when they're not playing, those per game checks aren't there. So, you know, especially when you consider the fact that, let's be honest, I mean, professional athletes, most of them are not known for being frugal, or at least just being smart with their money from a standpoint of setting money aside in case something like this happens, because I'm sure they didn't predict it. So,
right. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, so it's a lot.
Yeah, I know what he was trying to do. I know what he was trying to do, but that was
what he's like.
Hey, it's a lot harder to host when we're not all in the same spot. Because
you gotta use a little wave sign on there, man. That's what it's there for.
What are you talking about? Do this shit like around the horn, just mute everybody.
I was literally looking for it, and I couldn't find it. But Terrell's first take somehow turned into Terrell and Daniel's first take, and then Terrell went back.
No, he finished, and then we went into our discussions of it.
Derek had to do his thing. He had to tell everybody why they're here.
Hey, it was all good stuff.
They know why they're here, man. They're here for that real. Tell them.
Yeah. In fact, you know what? So anyways, let's keep going.
No, wait.
Yeah, go on, man.
Whoa. Hold up. It was all good stuff.
Tell them why you mad, son.
Only problem is we didn't tell anything about what we was talking about, which is the joke of Terrell's first take. So y'all said all this great stuff, and we haven't really set up the story. From the entire standpoint of just, I mean, we got the bare bones, but there's a little more.
Bare bones? What?
You got like a 70.
Bare bones.
There was a little more. I was gonna set up that the NBA had agreed upon a structure for the setup of coming back. You know, all this where they're gonna play. You know, I wasn't gonna do any of that. I was
do that now.
I was gonna kick it to Austin.
Yeah, go.
Austin, give him the what for.
I wasn't prepared for this. I ain't gonna lie to you. NBA's coming back, and
that's Austin with the what for? Thanks, Austin.
No, I mean, I didn't prepare for it at all. But basically, the NBA is coming back. They agreed on a play structure. They're going to come back and play 8 exhibition games to determine seeding, and then from there, they're just going to enter straight into a tournament, like you would normally in the postseason, with the potential for playing games, which would be pretty exciting. But I'll be honest, I don't know how they were going to do that. I don't know if it's like a one and done or if they were going to do a small series. So if anybody knows,
I believe it's if the 9 seed is within 3 games with the 8 seed, they would do a play-in game. Otherwise, they would just go straight into the playoffs.
Okay, so they'll do a one-off playing game. Okay. Cool. So
it all depends how close they were, though.
Yes.
I thought if they were like within like 2, then they'll play like 3 games. If they get 2, then they can go in. If they were within 1, they play like 1
okay.
game.
The,
Like
the
that.
8 seed, is basically in a double elimination tournament. The 9 seed would be in a single elimination tournament.
Roger, that makes sense.
Yeah, something like that.
Yep. Basically, the NBA is coming back though, and they are going to be playing in Orlando. They're going to be playing at Disney World, and they are going to be isolated. There's not going to be anybody in and out. Everybody's going to be doing their own thing. So immediately the concern is COVID. Now, because America decided to pop off in the meantime, now there's a new layer that's entered the fray, and that's about whether or not they should even come back as a distraction to America in this very, very life-changing time. I mean, that's what it is. It's a very important time. So Kyrie, you guys already touched on it, but Kyrie came out and is very firmly anti-coming back, saying that it will detract from the message, that it's detracting from the protests, that if we're out there doing this, then we're part of the problem. Because we're not protesting too, essentially. COVID isn't really the main story here, but COVID is its own thing, of course, because it's a huge deal. In fact, Ezekiel Elliott has COVID. Like, it just everything's crazy right now.
Yeah.
But on top of that, some other players have come out. I know Dwight Howard did, of course. Dwight Howard said he was going to. LeBron said he's playing. He said, we're playing. And then who was it that came out and said, hey, if LeBron's hooping, we're all hooping?
Lou Williams.
That was Lou. Yeah.
Oh, that was Patrick Beverly.
Oh, Patrick Beverly. Yeah, Patrick
And
Beverly.
you know that's coming from Patrick Beverly. I mean, he's that one dude that's like, it's business, not personal. If LeBron playing, everybody.
We all hooping.
Say what you want to say.
So yeah, I mean that's pretty much the big debate is whether or not it's right for NBA players to come back in this time, or at least that's the debate that Kyrie wants to be having.
Well, Kyrie also, it's boiled down to that, but they did also have some issues, some concerns about logistics, about not being able to see their families for an extended period of time, because when they initially come back, they're not going to be able to see their family. And then once they get into the playoffs, I think some of their family will be allowed into the quarantine bubble at that point. But for the initial 8 games and such, before the playoffs get started and before they eliminate some of these teams, they're going to keep it to strictly strict isolation pretty much. And so there's some concerns over that. There's also some concerns because the NBA owners, a lot of them now, there have been a few. Mark Cuban has been pretty vocal, as he normally is really on these kind of topics about racism and condemning it and such things of that nature. But for the most part, the owners have been very quiet on these issues. And so the NBA players, some of the NBA players are upset with that as well, as they come back to try to make these owners some money. But of course, as you've all said, it's not just about making the owners some money. They have financial stake as this as well. Right. And so let's get into that. For me personally, this is one of those times. I think there's a few times where you have an argument. I don't want to say a few because there's more than a few. But sometimes you have an argument where I don't think that there's necessarily anyone who's particularly wrong. Kyrie, from his perspective and from where he's thinking, basically to me, and I said this on the interwebs yesterday, he basically just doesn't trust white people. And why would you? When you've seen that, what's the difference between why these protests have popped off and have actually gotten change moving, as opposed to when Eric Garner died, or as opposed to when Trayvon Martin died? And the NBA was in season and they did the I Can't Breathe things, and it was spotlighted, and they used their platform and they did everything as they should, because NBA players are always pretty vocal about this. So what's the difference between those times and this time? Well, one of the differences is that no one has pretty much anything else they can do right now except stew on their rage and their anger. They have ample time to call their senators. They have ample time to go protest. They have ample time to do all these things. And that is because, for the most part, distractions are gone. Movies, for the most part, aren't in session. And there's basically no sports to speak of right now. So when you take all the comforts and the luxuries and you strip it down, and all you have left is, being forced to look at political action, that matters. And it seems to have been at least part of the driving force as to why people are activated right now. And so there is a strong case for why would the NBA want to interrupt that and take that chance, because there's a chance that, like the opposing side says, that it'll just amplify their voices. It'll be, the focus will be on them. They'll have plenty of time to speak out. They'll be able to use their platform. All that is accurate. and it could enhance the message, but it also could detract from the message. And so Kyrie basically is, I feel like, for the most part, besides some of the other grievances he's laid out, he's saying, I'm not going to take that chance because what I see right now is action. And what if when we give, everyone their comforts back, everyone gets their toys back, they no longer have the time to do what needs to be done. And so if there was no other money tied involved, I would say Kyrie's 100% correct. Unfortunately, as Daniel already stated, he perfect counter to Kyrie's point, which is everyone hasn't made the money you've made. Some people need these checks. Some people need this money. And so that is a real other factor. And I don't think it's even incumbent upon us or even Kyrie or every individual player is going to have to make their own individual choice. And then as a collective, they'll ultimately make the choice as a group. But I don't, this is one of those cases where I don't necessarily think there's a right or wrong answer. There is just an answer, and then they'll have to go from there.
I don't know if the terms of the comeback have specified whether or not they'll give players an option. I'm curious about that now that I'm thinking about it. Like, I was kind of thinking in the back of my mind, like, yeah, they need to come together as a collective, but at the end of the day, can they morally tell somebody, hey, you've got to play when they don't want to? Now, in your job, you've got to do your job or else you get replaced. I mean, it's kind of what it is, but they're in a very unique position, which is why Kyrie is able to flex his might in this case, because he has that power. Like, he is that important to the league. He has that potential. So, in one way, I'm really, really impressed that this is his hill that he's going to, die on, for better or worse, because his whole career he's been kind of made fun of for being a weird thinker. But this is one of the times where it's actually paid off. Like, he is his own man, and he's doing his own thing right now. But my curiousness is like, okay, well, what happens if players don't want to? Are they going to be in trouble? Are they going to be fined? I personally don't know the answer to that, so I'm curious if y'all had seen anything about it. Because what happens if we do go to these playoffs and then you have a team with like 7 players that don't want to play? I mean, what's going to happen here? I mean, do they hold the Players Association liable? I really don't know what the answer to that is.
If they decide not, if an individual player, because I don't think they thought of this as a collective, because really this was probably more in their minds as some people might not want to play because of COVID, which they were going to give them their opportunity to do that, and they wouldn't be fined. They would have the opportunity to sit out. Obviously, they would not force them to try to play, but of course that comes with the consequence of they would then not get paid because they are not playing. They're not doing their job. So that is what would happen as an individual deciding to not play. Now, if enough players decide not to play, that creates a whole different scenario. And one would think eventually if enough players don't want to play, they just won't play. And then the owners will, levy the consequences of what that does to the CBA and all that accordingly, because there will be consequences.
I thought they had mentioned something about getting replacement players if needed too.
I hadn't seen that.
That was kind of thrown around.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think there was an expansion of rosters. I know that instead of 15 players, it was now 17. And apparently, if a team needs to pick up players, they can pick up a player that has been on an NBA roster, any player that has been on an NBA roster.
The teams. I'm sorry, just to clarify, the teams that are cut?
No, like literally any player.
Free agent.
Like let's say there's a player that was on a roster that on a team that wasn't even in contention. So they're not one of the, 16 teams or?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So like hypothetically they could pick up like Devin Booker. I'm just asking like.
Oh, no, if the player is not under contract.
Oh, okay. That's
all. They're free agent, yeah.
Okay. So they're outside of the restrictions. Okay.
Right. So if somebody has become a free agent, they can pick up any free agent. And I mean, I didn't see the dollar ramifications of it. I didn't hear anything about whether or not that was going to, salary cap or what have you. But basically, it was, they had expanded the rosters to 17 players and basically said that, or at least that's what the plan is, I think, and that they can pick up any player that was on an NBA roster.
I don't think the NBA wants that. I mean, obviously they don't want that, but I think, I don't know. To me, that feels like the worst case scenario. But I mean, at the end of the day,
they just want to get through this contract though, for the TV contract. You kind of just have to go through it no matter what, just to kind of make sure that they meet all their clauses and requirements and stuff, so they can have it for next year or going forward. I would think
it feels that way.
So, what do y'all feel about the grievance specifically as it relates to the owners and their involvement in or lack of involvement in the social issues, because this does have a tinge of why should I play for you when you don't really actually care about me? Which is starting to permeate through, even throughout college. We'll get into that a little later. But even in the NBA, some of Kyrie's animosity seems to stem from, why would I go make you money right now when you have all the time in the world and you've not stepped up to the plate? Where do y'all kind of land from that perspective on this?
I guess I'll go first on that. At the end of the day, I'm conflicted because, I would love to say like, oh, you know what, everybody needs to really step up to the plate here. But at the end of the day, it's a business. So I don't think morally the business, I mean, this is the problem with capitalism, but morally the business doesn't have an obligation to slow down for this. You would want them to. You would think that, like, as a player, you would love to know that your owner's got your back and that your owner's going to stand up for stuff that you're supporting as a cause. But at the end of the day, that's not the power dynamic. I mean, the power dynamic is they want you to play basketball to make everybody money. And You'll get that money too, as long as you play by our rules. So the problem is, for me, are the rules unjust? Like, do I feel that the NBA is being unfair? And I don't. I mean, I wish that the NBA was being more vocal about this, more of a leader about this, and maybe Adam Silver can be the leader in this and force the NBA to protest. We can't force somebody to protest, but force the NBA to allow these protests, to allow demonstrations at every game, to allow whatever the teams feel is necessary and have player input and all that kind of stuff. That'd be fantastic. But at the end of the day, you're either going to play basketball or you're not. And if you don't, that's great. More power to you. But I don't think it's fair to say that the owners are forcing you to play if the players are voting to play.
Yeah.
So.
For me on this, though, I'm actually on the side of what you're saying in terms of them feeling some type of way about the owners not having a statement or coming out in support, because really for capitalism, it's about who holds most leverage. And for a player like, say, Kyrie Irving, he holds a lot of leverage because before he went to Brooklyn, he had a lot of pretty much every team in the league wanted him, right? And you probably picked Brooklyn because they're like, okay, we're a family, we'll take care of you, we care about you, X, Y, and Z, KD's here, all that kind of stuff too. So now he's like, okay, y'all maybe said this when y'all first were recruiting me, but now it's different. Or he's like, okay, if this is how you really feel, then maybe I don't want to be on this team anymore. So for a player like him, he can have that gripe and grieves because he has that type of power to wave around to saying, okay, I want to leave, and that's going to hurt the organization a lot. Or he said, I'll sit out, and that's going to hurt them a lot. Now for like a regular NBA player, no, they're not going to really be too concerned about how the owner really feels, I don't think, because it's like, well, I can't only go so many places to kind of get paid. Now, I might not, if I have an option, that I probably won't sign with this team. But if it's between just this team or, going overseas, I'm still going to play for them or whatever. I just won't really have too much invested in the actual organization. I'm just here as like a mercenary or something, But I mean, overall, though, when you're in that position of being like a high profile employee, which is really what Kyrie is in terms of, even if you're working for like a regular company or whatever, if you are high enough on the ladder, you can make certain demands and they can do certain things because you add that much value to the company. Right. So I don't think it's really absurd for him to feel that type of way and feel that they should act a certain type of way if the high profile players are asking for that, or most of the players are asking for that as well. So yeah, I don't think it's really any out of the realm for him asking for that.
Yeah, I mean, it felt to me like he was trying to. It felt to me like he was trying to take the bull by the horns and kind of speak for what I feel like are some players that, I'm not going to sit here and act like this is my own thought. That I read as much. And when I read this story and I read this statement, he flat out said, I'm speaking for some players that don't feel like they have the leverage to speak on it. He flat out said it. That's what the statement says. There's a lot of players that are afraid to speak out because they're in a position where if the, ownership decides, that dude's causing trouble, we're going to get rid of that cat. What I noticed was that he mentioned men, women. He was talking about all kinds of athletes. So I honestly, that's an area where I am not 100% sure how deep this goes, but he gave the impression that there was a huge contingent of athletes that are like feeling this way about their given sport and their given team, and that he didn't think it was fair that their voices aren't being heard. And so it was interesting because I got the impression that while understanding that he's in a little bit of a position where he can speak out because he's an asset to a team that a team probably feels is somewhat invaluable when you look at, where Brooklyn could be if all the pieces are in place. kind of felt like he could speak out, and he's not going to suffer the repercussions that maybe a guy that's maybe the sixth guy, the first guy off the bench or second guy off the bench probably would feel. So that's the impression I got from reading the statement. In regards to the ownership, I got to be realistic with you, man. We know that there are some owners out there that are outspoken on these subjects. You mentioned Mark Cuban. But by and large, these owners are not going to do anything that's going to get in the way of them securing the bag. As rich as they are,
right?
As rich as they are. I mean, let's be realistic. A lot of these guys are billionaires, and I'm not talking about like organizations like the Spurs, where you've got, like a group of people that own varying percentages of a team. I'm talking about like these teams where like one guy owns the team. A Mark Cuban, well, he passed away recently, but like a guy like Paul Allen, like guys like that.
Or Steve Ballmer. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, like dudes like that, they have an option of where they can come out and say, hey, you know what I'm saying? This is how I feel about this. If they don't, their feet aren't held to the fire the same way. I was listening to the radio and they were talking about Jerry Jones and how he hasn't come out. And my first thought was, who the hell expected him to?
Hey, he donated $1 million to Trump. Don't forget. I'm a Cowboys fan.
That was what they brought up. And my thought process, and it was interesting because the guy I was listening to was saying, guess what? You can be both. You can feel for Black folks in this situation while donating to Trump. What you say what you want to say, I'm like, I don't know about all that, bro. But that's what he was saying. And I was like, I suppose it is possible, but from a standpoint of where we stand today with no. Nah, bro. You can't give 7 figures to that cat's inaugural whatever fund and turn around and try to convince me that you care anything about anything other than securing the bag. I think guys like Jerry Jones, and unfortunately a lot of these guys that own NBA teams, I unfortunately believe that they care about Black lives mattering about as far as they can either shoot a basketball or throw a football or hit a baseball. And unfortunately, that's my thought on it, is that I really feel like they care about Black lives about as much as it goes that far. That's it. And it's a sad reality, but no, I'm not, I don't expect any of these owners, Mark Cuban been speaking out, so I'm not shocked.
Yeah.
The usual suspects are there. There's no absence of the usual suspects that are speaking out on these subjects. So I'm not shocked when I don't hear from some of these other guys. Okay, so what? If maybe I had even a slight tiny bit of, as you could call it, surprise, is my man's in New York. What's the owner of the Knicks?
You're talking about James Dolan?
Dolan.
Oh, Dolan?
The only reason I say I have a tiny little itty bitty of surprise that Dolan hasn't said something, and it's only because of one reason. Because that dude is already in a mode where he needs to try to figure out how to do something to not look like such a dumbass.
You think so?
Oh.
It's not happening, and so it's like, I would have thought he would have at least tried something. I think they put one of them lame-ass statements out, but other than that…
Bring Spike Lee in. Bring Spike Lee in, man.
No, James Dolan hates Spike Lee.
No, I know that. That's what I'm saying.
Carlos Lee.
No more like he's been doing for 30 years.
That story was funny.
They kicked my man Spike Lee to the curb. Like they did him like Radio Raheem when he tried to come in the back door. Where he been coming in the back door.
Be even nicer. Oh my God. Be even
like
you don't even have to.
Nobody know nothing about. Come on, man. Y'all tell me y'all know about Radio Raheem.
The right thing, Terrell.
I know what Radio Raheem is. I'm saying that's why. But the way you
come on, man. Y'all had to give me that one. I feel like Captain America.
But I'm saying, like, you don't even have to. You don't even gotta.
Radio Raheem.
I'm just saying though, like they strung my man up he been coming in the back door of Madison Square Garden, for 30 years, and they played him like, and I'm like, so I'm surprised. I'm not surprised at all that they haven't been able to get Spike Lee to come out and rep the Knicks. I mean, Spike Lee is always going to be more the Knicks than probably any player that has ever played for the Knicks. That being said, it's like you burnt that bridge, which is exactly what I'm saying. It's like Dolan at some point got to be like, man, I got to start to repair at some point. And it's like, no, he's just letting those warning lights come on in the dashboard, and he's just like, fuck it. And he just keep driving. And I'm like, nah, man.
Honestly, I feel like Spike Lee's like, why am I going to save you now, though? After all the stuff you've done to me, why am I going to come out and save you like now when you –
Spike is like, nah, bro.
Oh, yeah. Spike ain't going to save him. He's petty as fuck, too.
Yeah, when you lost –
And he should be, but I'm saying you don't even have to do a handshake. Like, you could just advertise the Five Bloods on Madison Square. Like, do something like that. Just be like, yeah, we're down. He's not going to. James Dolan is who he is.
Do something.
Y'all hit on something that's pretty interesting, and that's, we all kind of have an expectation of what the NBA owners will do. The interesting question here, I think, is what should we expect them to do, because that's really become what this movement's about, right? People trying to speak truth to power and see what we can force you to do. And Daniel hit on that with the players. Where are they going to kind of put their loyalties at, and how are they going to assert their power, Kyrie Irving, to try to get the desired result? And so for me, that kind of manifests itself into, I have to know what the players want and then kind of ride for it. Because again, it comes back to, I feel like there are very valid ways to handle this on both sides. And it reminds me a lot of the Clipper situation with Donald Sterling. When Donald Sterling, all that stuff came out about him being racist, everyone wanted the Clippers to boycott. Everyone said this was the moment. This was the moment to boycott, to get that NBA game canceled, and they didn't do that. Instead, they did a gesture where they threw their warm-ups up in the middle of the court, and that was how they decided to voice their power. And I actually defended that at the time, and I still stand by it, because there was no need to burn the house down.
Right.
Point. They were already going to get what they wanted, which was Donald Sterling getting evicted from the NBA. Yeah. So protest isn't really about gestures. It's about wielding your power so that you can get the desired change. If you're already getting the desired change, there's no point to protest.
Sure. For
the most part. I'm not saying symbolic gestures don't matter at all, but for the most part, once you're getting what you want, there's no reason for you to sacrifice yourself. In this moment, there is a reason to sacrifice. But I can't be the one to tell them what they should be willing to sacrifice for this moment, because it's going to take sacrifice. If you effectively wield your power to cancel the NBA season, that's a sacrifice. That's going to mean something, and it's going to affect the owners, and it's going to affect the players too. And that's what protest is. You exercising the power you have to try to force change upon someone who is more powerful than you, wielding the power you do have to affect change. But I have to know, that's what they want, because there's also another way you can affect change, and that's through what some people have said as the counter to this. We make our bread. We become more of the system. We wield more of the power. We have more generational wealth, and then we make change that way. And there's an argument for that. That there's a legitimate argument that that's the way you can affect change in this particular situation. They use their platform in addition to that, and try to spotlight this and try to put more political pressure via that avenue. And they give everyone their entertainment back. But I do think we have an obligation to not just let the owners off the hook from the standpoint of just saying, well, this is what they're going to do because of capitalism, so that's fine. Because what this has been about, and what this should continue to be about, is Black people should be tired of them using our bodies, our labor, our intellectual content without giving us the due respect in return, of keeping us safe, of making programs that will uplift and get rid of the generational sins of slavery and oppression, because that's what they do right now. They profit off of our, off of our entertainment in all avenues, and they don't give us enough back. That's just the bottom line. That's just the facts of the matter. And so I think it's a rightful grievance to say, hey, when I'm shooting baskets and I'm a free agent, as Daniel said, you coming at me and talking about all this family stuff, but you're donating to Trump. That doesn't make sense. Why are you donating to a man who at every step of his life is a proven racist who has wielded his power against black people. He has discrimination. He has housing discrimination lawsuits against him. He has a track record of terrorizing the Central Park Five, who have been proven to be innocent. He has a history while in office of dismantling and attempting to dismantle hard-won civil rights gains, not only for black people and other people of color, but for the trans community and for the LGBTQ community. So
shout out to them. They got a big win. Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Based them
For
up.
real.
We celebrate that as the administration tries to do its job. The Supreme Court held tough and gave us a victory today. So we care about that. But you can't. But bottom line, to something that Terrell said, there is no argument for this man that you support this man, but you also think Black Lives Matter. There is none. You can pretend and you can sit in your bubble and you can try to think that. But if you look at President Trump's track record, if you look what he's literally trying to do once he has been given power, if you look at how he's wielded his power throughout life, there is no argument to say that man cares anything about me and my struggle and my people's struggle when you look at everything he has done. So those things are incongruous, and it's time that players held the owners accountable in some respect for trying to toe that line. And we have to hold them accountable as well. We can't just say, well, capitalism and we expect it of them, so that's what it is, because I think we're past that point, and we're trying to build past that point, and the only way to do that is to hold them accountable. It's the same principle as when we let them get away with that during the collective bargaining of, they're trying to take away your entertainment, and we're the guys who are trying to give you back your entertainment, and the media kind of sits in the middle of that, right? And to me, that's always been the wrong way to do that. That's not how you cover those things. You can't play the fence in this situation. I'm not saying any of y'all were doing that. I'm just saying I think it's incumbent upon us in this moment, no matter what the players choose, to make sure we're holding the owners accountable, especially when we've seen how easy it is to say something. You don't have to say everything, but you can say a little bit of something. Even the NFL did that a little bit. And so I think it's incumbent. My point would be, no matter where we side with the players on this or where the players come out, because obviously it's not going to be a unanimous decision either way, we can always support that, and there's valid arguments on both sides. Where there are not valid arguments is not holding the owners accountable.
Yeah.
Not to hijack this point, but Goodell just came out about less than an hour ago encouraging the signing of Colin Kaepernick.
They did that a year ago.
No.
I know.
No, Goodell specifically came out and basically said, I encourage NFL teams to sign him to a contract. So it's, as opposed to, hey, we'll give you a contract if you sign this. It's more along the lines of like, he's encouraging it, which I feel like he was almost backed into a corner to do.
Honestly, that sounds like he's giving teams permission, which is even more fucked up.
Which makes it work, exactly. And that's what
I'm saying. I'm like, he's not a GM. Who cares what he thinks?
It's all right, guys. It's cool to sign Kaepernick now. We're over it.
That almost makes me less optimistic, because then it comes off like, I'm not stopping anybody from doing it kind of a situation. And then when nobody does it, it's like, okay, I got that cop out. Like, well, hey, man, I encouraged it.
That's been the circular logic from the beginning, right? If he was an NFL cornerback, he would be signed. So whenever he is not signed, ergo, it proves he is not an NFL quarterback. And so Roger Goodell's permission slip, as it did the last time they tried this, when they held that faux,
the
tryout thing, it's just a way to make it look as if they have changed their minds or never been the one standing in his way, when really that's not the case. As a ownership group, they've all blackballed him from the league. So whether Roger Goodell, and we all know Roger Goodell wields almost no political power within that system.
He works for them.
None.
But wouldn't that add to the whole argument about collusion, though? If it's like, okay, well, I think they should sign him now and he gets signed. It's like, okay, well, since you gave the league's blessing and someone signs them, does that mean y'all are withholding because you didn't have the blessing before?
Good luck in court.
Have this whole argument from the whole point. It's like, it's collusion, obviously.
Oh yeah, prove it, Daniel.
The only thing I can think of is that maybe
it's the wording of it. I feel like it's the wording of it. It's like, it's one thing if you want to come out and say collectively, whether people believe it or not, no one if you want to say nobody in the NFL is stopping this from happening. Okay, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
people are gonna make a choice whether they believe it or not. But to come out and say I encourage this is almost like, again, I'm encouraging it. Now, look, I'm just a dude that works for these other 30 dudes that are really, really old and really, really white and have a lot of money. And they probably gonna tell me to go get bent. But I'm just telling y'all that, I mean, whatever, I'm with it. And that to me is like, you ain't helping, bro. Okay, thank you.
It seems like they must have some cover with that settlement agreement that they reached with him, to where he probably can't bring up the collusion. Sure. He can't lay the collusion lawsuit back at their feet. Right. So, I mean, that's probably the reason they feel covered in saying this in the first place. But, I mean, it's going to look pretty suspicious if all of a sudden Colin Kaepernick is on an NFL team after, the de facto leader of the NFL has said, hey, it's time to give him a job. Well, why did you
why would you put yourself out there? Because then you almost make it look like as if you were the guy that was like, everybody was waiting for your blessing. I mean, everybody knows otherwise.
Yeah.
But it's like you make it look like, oh, he has spoken. Like, you ain't got no power.
I mean, truthfully, that's probably what it is, man. They probably told him, all right, we need to get Kaepernick on the team. Roger, make the announcement.
So yeah, I mean,
but if
you take it as he represents the owners, because let's be realistic, I mean, he doesn't really represent the players. If you take it as he represents the owners and he's like the press secretary for the owners, and he's basically saying, I'm going to come out and I'm going to say this. Are you guys with it? Yeah, man, whatever. And then he goes out and says it. It's like, okay, so now what? I mean, I don't know, man.
If the NFL was smarter, they would simply, behind some backroom dealings and try to keep it as under wraps as possible. Yeah. They would figure out what team is going to sign this man. And then once he is signed, then you would say, this is what we wanted all along. We're glad he's back in the league. And then you release a statement that way, and you do it behind closed doors. Instead, because the NFL, I don't know why, for an organization that's at the top of its field in terms of the sports world, they're so bad at these things. They're so bad at PR, and it's really not even the hard PR. They're just really bad. And so this is –
hey, man, they still got the bag. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? I mean, so they can make billions.
The NFL is so risk-averse that I really believe that's where a lot of their flaws come from, is that they try to do the bare minimum because if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
And so a lot and when you're playing scared, that's when you make your most mistakes, right? And the NFL is always playing scared.
And you said that. I mean, you talked about it with the CTE thing, with the helmet. You've talked about that before, because that's it. But that's what they're proving to be doing, is like, we're going to do something when we absolutely have to, because, oh, great. The world is going this direction. The country is going this direction. Our fan base might be going this direction. So, hey, let me join the team. Let me get on the bandwagon and let me make it look like I'm contributing. And it's like, I know they're giving the money. What is it like? Is it like $250 million over 10 years?
Over 10, 100 or 250 over 10? Some over 10 years.
I could have swore it was $250 million. The only reason, because I had $25 million a year stuck in my head, but pretty decent chunk of money that they're giving out. I for some reason, I think there was a story that initially it was lower, and like a contingent of players went and was like, nah, bro, I need to be more than that. And then like it like went up. But I thought it was $250 million over 10 years. But that being said, that's nice. But again, if I'm not hearing an admission and an apology to Colin Kaepernick, call me a homer because I'm a Niners fan, whatever. But if I'm not hearing an apology and some additional, I'm not even saying somebody got to sign the dude. I want to hear an apology. And then they need to come out and they need to undo all the nonsense that they put out there about this dude. John Elway out here lying, talking about they offered him X amount of dollars and did all this stuff when they didn't. All these coaches and these assistant coaches and some of these knuckleheads that's out here, these so-called executives claiming that he wasn't a good player and all that nonsense.
Yeah.
Especially when it's like these are guys that these are guys that he bodied when he was playing. Like you can go back and look at tape of some of the dudes that are talking the most trash about this dude from an executive standpoint and from a coaching standpoint, the coaches that have come out and said bad things about him. Go and look at tape of the 2.5, 3 years, 4 years, whatever it was when he was kind of at the top of his game. And I'm telling you, he was bodying these dudes' teams. Like, it was hilarious. And people were like, oh, he has no touch on his passes. He only throws fastballs, And there's literally video evidence. It's like when Trump comes out and tweets some dumb shit, and then you find a tweet from 10 years ago, and it was like, he said the opposite. It's the same thing with Cap, dude. It's like they say he can't do all these things, and there's literally tape of him doing those things to the team of like the guy that's saying it. I mean, so it's nonsense, man. They need to come out and they need to be like, hey, man, we was wrong.
They were about everything but Kaepernick.
What you were doing is a lot better than what's going on.
Well, what's funny, go ahead, Austin.
No, I was just saying, like, that's basically what they did. They were like, we're wrong about everything except Kaepernick. Fuck him.
Right.
Like,
they don't even say his name.
Well,
They won't say that man's name. That's the biggest disrespect out of all of it. They won't even say that cat's name. They literally try to put him down. When you look at the rosters, or when you look at, there's some sort of database or something where it shows like the status of players. They put him in there as retired. His girlfriend had to go in and put them on blast on Twitter for them to change him to NFL quarterback because he's not officially retired. They are doing everything they can to erase this dude from history. But I'll be damned if I try to tear down a statue of General Lee. Get the fuck out of here.
just as a thought experiment. Yeah, for real.
Come on.
This is a thought experiment. Do y'all think Kaepernick's getting in the Hall?
No.
Like,
I'm not dumb. I mean,
not for game. No, not for body of work. No, obviously not.
I could say at some point, because of his work for social justice.
That's what I'm saying. No, definitely not for body of work.
Like,
I mean, there's
honorary.
You to believe that the NFL actually cares about those things.
See, I don't know. That's what I'm thinking. Are you optimistic that 20 years from now the NFL will be different? I'm just curious.
I would love to see it.
No.
I would love to see it.
Because first off, the NFL is so strict with their Hall of Fame in the first place.
I mean, they are, but
like the strictest.
They're way stricter than the NBA. Yeah.
They're like they're like probably even more strict than baseball. It's a really high bar to get in the Hall of Fame, and they do have a contributors section, but it takes the contributors a long time and a long body of work to get in.
It's like, here, you've been doing NFL for 80 years. Here's your award.
Yeah, and usually you're dead unless you're like Jerry Jones. Usually by the time you've done it, you're dead. And so like I'm not asking. I'm not you know me. If there's an answer for the NFL, I'm on the opposite side. but also I just don't see them thinking of it in those terms in modern history. In our lifetime, maybe 60, 80 years down the road, maybe things will have changed and they'll start thinking of things in that nature. When you think of his impact on the game and how it will reverberate throughout history, there's certainly an argument that he could be in as a contributor. As well as, he had some pretty decent seasons. Not that would get him in based on those seasons, but when you factor in he was an elite quarterback for a little bit with the contributions to the game via his social justice work, that's a pretty strong case. And to piggyback off Terrell's point, what's interesting about this kind of stuff is it's not even. There's always all this representational stuff, and I'm not saying that stuff's bad. We clowned the Democratic Congress members of the Congress the other day as children somersaulting in the background to be on.
It was good form, man. It was good form.
They're so
it was.
They're gonna somersault in. So we clowned members of Congress the other day for the kente cloth and all that kind of stuff, and it's like we don't need your gestures per se. We would rather have actions, right? And so that's another one. The point is well taken, where it's like we don't need the NFL to continuously do all these gestures. Yeah, right your wrongs.
Yeah.
Fix what you've done.
Like fix the situation. I mean, and I keep harping on the Kaepernick thing, but the fact that apparently Goodell made this statement today means I believe that he actually had to say Colin Kaepernick's name, which is crazy to me because literally he has avoided saying Colin Kaepernick's name. Like, so, I mean, I really hope, I'm not optimistic, but I hope it leads to something. But nah, man, I don't know that I envision him in the Hall of Fame, at least not in the capacity of
Austin, it keeps getting darker and darker wherever you are.
I'm in nighttime.
Yeah,
no, it's because so if I had the light on behind me, it would be too bright.
Austin is starting to look like that poster of Suge Knight, Snoop Dogg, and Dr. Dre.
Plus, what's funny is that the camera's got a light on it, so like if I get farther away, I'm just gone. So anyways,
fade to the background.
I was gonna say to tie back into what you guys were talking about before. Well, specifically, just real quick, the reason I bring up the Kaepernick thing, anyways, is because I think it's kind of interesting. I personally don't think what Kaepernick's done is I don't want to say it like this because it's dismissive, but I don't think he did anything unnaturally heroic. Like I think he just did something he thought was right, and it just happened to be what pissed off enough white people to talk about it, and so it became like this huge thing. I think personally, what he did is amazing, and I respect it a lot. But at the end of the day, all he really did was just kind of do his thing, and it became
Like
what it
you
is
said, it
now.
was what was right.
So I think if anything gets into the hall about it, it should be to acknowledge the fact that the NFL, this period of time, the NFL was covering up a lot of stuff, and it had problems. But I don't know if the NFL is willing to ever admit that. So I have no idea. I was just curious what y'all thought on that. But to tie it back to what you were talking about originally,
I would say that there's a bit of heroics with it though, because once he got going, it was pretty obvious that he was putting his entire career on the line.
Yeah. No,
it
absolutely.
was pretty obvious that more than half of America had turned on him, thought that he was a traitor to his own country, started causing him all kinds of crazy things. So for the fact that he kept going with it after all the initial backlash, I think that is pretty heroic that he stayed with it. Doing the first time, he said, yeah, he kind of wanted to protest and kind of speak up about it. But once he kind of saw what really America was about in terms of what he was doing, yeah, I don't know some people that could have stayed with us the entire time and still champion it and still kind of just almost have lost your entire career, a game you've been playing probably since you were a little kid, your entire life, what you've been dreaming of doing, and kind of gave it up in your prime. That's something that I don't think too many people even, nowadays could do, just knowing what would happen.
And that's why I didn't really want to say it that way, but that's exactly how I feel about it too. Like, it's extremely great the way he did everything. Like, he stuck to it, and he literally lost his career for it. I mean, it's just bottom line. He lost everything that he worked for something he believed in. But like I said, that was just more of a thought experiment.
It feels like people are almost madder that his profile is arguably bigger than what it was even as a player. Mind you, this dude quarterbacked the team to the Super Bowl, and I believe it's two or three straight NFC Championship games. He quarterbacked the team. He was special on the field. And I think a lot of the people that are on the opposite side of what he's been trying to do almost seem to be angrier about the fact that his profile is probably bigger than it's ever been. When you look at it from a standpoint of he's still out there doing the work, and he refuses to even the funny thing is he refuses to come out and toot his own horn about it. You don't see him on TV every day. You don't see him. But yet other people are talking about him, and other people are saying, you need to say his name. Other people are saying, you need to give him his props, apologize to him, do this, do that. Other people are saying that. And it feels to me like when I look at like just whether it's Twitter or whether posts about him or stories that are derogatory towards him, it's interesting because they seem almost enraged at the fact that we got this guy out of football. They blew him out of there because they didn't want to hear what he was talking about, and he's still having an impact.
Yeah,
and it almost feels to me like they're that much angrier about it. And the funny thing to me is, in an ironic sort of way, it's like, I bet you if you would have just let him do his thing, is it possible that maybe we're not here right now? So for us, that might be a bad thing, but for them, those that are against this whole situation, they probably would prefer to have it where he was just kneeling on the sideline and bringing attention to it and talking about things that were happening, but yet you don't have all the other things that are happening. Because right now, this feels like a shift.
Real, it is. Absolutely.
Real.
Well, that's
real.
And he was one of the dominoes that led to it. There's no disputing it. There's no disputing it.
They have no choice but to link him to that forever. They have no choice but to link him to what you see happening right now. Because everybody's going to say, that dude did what you are saying, you claiming that you want people to do. You claim that you want people to just be quiet and protest in a quiet way, or, kind of be reserved and do it. You say you want that, and that's what you had. Now we've realized that you never listened to that and you didn't care about that. So guess what? Here we are. So
Yep.
you had it your way already.
Well, that's kind of that's another reason, in addition to, not being able to do anything because of quarantine, that's probably another reason these protests have kind of taken root this time, is because one of the main, criticisms was, well, why don't you do it this way? And there's receipts now, right? We did it that way. We literally had a dude, like Terrell said, the ironic part is that he kind of has, like, there's no way when Kaepernick thought he was going to do that thing, he thought it was going to turn into this. He probably thought, hey, I'll make my stand. It'll get rowdy for a little bit, but it'll calm down, and then it'll kind of go back to business as normal. And then it just turned into this thing. It's like MLK, except without. I don't think it was as willful. MLK is very willful with how he chose to exercise civil disobedience.
Right.
With Kaepernick, he kind of fell into that kind of role where the reaction is really what powered everything. If white people didn't react this way, it wouldn't foster as much change.
Yeah.
The reason that we were able to gain civil rights gains is because when you turn on TV, you see dudes getting sprayed with water hoses. That elicits a reaction, right? So now you see a dude getting his job taken away and his livelihood and death threats and all that kind of stuff over simply not standing. That elicits a reaction, especially in comparison to when now people are starting to exercise other forms of protest. And so in a roundabout way, and as Terrell's point, the reaction to what he did is what's made this movement possible, where if it had gone a different way, it might have just kind of flared out. And we would have maybe had to wait a little longer on some other, powder keg moments to kind of pop off instead of this slow kind of grind that we've been on since 2015 towards this moment.
Yeah, and I think what was you guys are saying it was ironic, and it is. I mean, it's ironic he didn't expect it to pop off like that. But for me, this all happens because that racism was so thick.
Yeah.
Like they just couldn't let one guy do that. They couldn't abide one person standing up for it. They had to open their mouths, and because of that, it became so much bigger of a problem. Like to me, it just highlights how big that thing is. Like if you go about your life and you're so bothered by this man, I mean, what's that say? And that's basically what popped everything to what it is now. But to kind of like backtrack on some other things that y'all talked about, because there's something I wanted to talk about before when you were talking about the owners and their obligations into Trump. I think you brought up a really great point. I mean, you named 4 easily actionable things that owners could do that would go a huge way. They could set up, pro-black coalitions inside any meaningful inner circles. They could set up funds to help alleviate economic discrepancies. They could set up all of these things to mitigate the economic loss of all of black entertainment being soaked up by white people. And it's not all of it, but I mean, it's enough of it that it's happened this way forever. And those are actionable things, like just little baby steps, but they just won't do it. They won't do it because billionaires just can't. I mean, we deify them all the way, but people talk all the time about how, it's easy. Like there's a phrase, what is it? It's easier for a camel to fit through a needle hole than for a billionaire to get into heaven. Because when you get to that point, you're just not a good person. You don't view people as people.
A lot of people.
Yeah,
I mean, it is what it is. Like,
I mean, to make $1 billion, you have to do so many morally questionable things. That's why when people are like, that's why Batman's quite unrealistic, and that's why people are like, why aren't there billionaires out here being Batmans? Because they don't have the moral compass of Batman.
Well,
It's an unrealistic thing. Iron Man and Batman are like the most unrealistic superheroes we probably have. Based on
Iron Man.
But if you think about the fact that look at their origins though, because I mean, depending on which take on those characters you think about, I mean, even the first Iron Man movie, I mean, let's be realistic. He was just making bombs and shit and blowing up people. And it was like, hey, no big deal. We make weapons. Yay. And, he was doing his thing out in the middle of the desert. And it was like questionable. And then he has this epiphany. And it's similar with like Nolan's Batman, where it was like, although it was weird with him because it was almost like he was playing the bad guy, the kind of a jerk, as a cover for
was,
this
yeah.
other guy that he was. Like, you know, when he rolled up with the two chicks in the Lambo and they're like lapped up on each other. Like, that was like peak, like, oh my God.
I love Christian Bale, but that scene.
then it's
That
like,
scene
you
where
know
Christian Bale
already.
crashes the Lambo to stop the ambulance, and they're like, "Bruce, what are you doing here?" And he's like, "Why? Is he important?" I was like,
I'm
"God
just
damn it,
trying
this
to
is
make the light." Like, you know what I'm saying?
I was
Oh
like, this-
yeah.
I was like, this-
So it was
this is
like,
too
we
much.
saw two different
This is too
renditions
much.
of like, yeah, but like, so one of them, it was almost like a cover. I'm gonna act like a douchebag, and I'm gonna be this other guy, and nobody's gonna believe I'm Batman because I'm such a douchebag in real life. But then on the other half, you do actually have a guy that was a douchebag, and he actually kind of remained one throughout. Like,
Well, so like the beauty of those stories. I mean, this is a tangent, but whatever. The beauty of those stories is like the beauty of Iron Man is that like it's all make believe, right? But at the end of the day, like look what would happen if one billionaire started caring.
we know, yeah.
I mean, obviously it's hyperbole, but at the same time, like, is it that much hyperbole to think like what would happen if this dude started doing good and all of a sudden he becomes a literal superhero? Like
Sure.
that's the kind of power that this man had just
Right.
because he was rich.
But
Whatever. I mean, it's idealism.
Unfortunately, in real life, what happens is Tony goes off the desert. He comes back. Him and Obadiah Stane have that meeting, right, where he tells him about the arc reactor, and he's like, "Tony, we can't make no money this way." And Tony's like, "Oh, that's right, you're right." And they they go back to their business.
My favorite Iron Man story is when he gave all of his employees a $2 wage increase for 4 months because there was a pandemic, and then he took it away at the end. That was my favorite Iron Man story.
That didn't happen.
But yeah, to tie back to that other stuff though, so because you were talking about the owners and the personal accountability, and you touched on Trump. I mean, yeah, to Daniel's point, like like fuck the owners in the sense that I'm a person who like I know you don't care about me because it's the same thing when you're talking about people who voted for Trump. I mean, one phrase that I've heard tossed around a lot, which I love, is you don't have to be racist to support Donald Trump, but by supporting Trump, you're saying you're okay with racism.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is. You're not personally being racist, but you're saying it's cool. It's not a deal breaker. Racism is not a deal breaker if you support Donald Trump.
Right.
So then you turn around
Right.
and you have an entire field of athletes that you're taking care of, and that imagery, a field of fucking athletes. I mean, that imagery isn't lost. Like this is literally they're out there working, making you money, and that's how you view people when you're an owner like that. So you would want your owner to have a little bit of compassion, to have just a degree of like, all right, look, what can we do? Because Mark Cuban can do that to an extent. I mean, obviously he's not without his own flaws, but Mark Cuban has that quote unquote personability to him that makes him mythic.
Yeah.
Imagine if any of the other owners had an ounce of that personality of like, hey, come talk to me. Let's see what we can do here.
Well, I mean, are we talking? I mean, let's be honest. Cuban, what is that? That's tech money, right?
Yeah.
And investment money. It's him believing in
Right.
people and
Now look at the
reinvesting.
NFL. I mean, how much oil money, gas money,
Reliance Stadium. I mean, shit.
yeah,
Oilers.
you know what I'm saying? How much oil money, energy, whatever. You look at that money and then you look at the age and it's obvious. Like there's a reason why. I mean, it's sad because I'm a Niners fan, but I don't recall what the Yorks, I don't recall what their thing is. I have
Oh,
no
the
idea.
Yorkshire Yorks. No, I'm just playing.
Huh?
The Yorks.
Like,
the Yorkies.
Like I know DeBartolo, like because DeBartolo's daughter took over, and then now her son has taken over. But like I don't know what their money originally came from. But that being said,
Yeah.
you can look at like these owners specifically in the NFL and to a lesser extent in the NBA, because realistically it's weird to me, but I feel like the NBA's owners don't have as big of a profile as NFL owners do. And so it's interesting because it's like when you look at the age of these owners, you can almost without even knowing figure out where their money came from, because these guys are all in their 70s and 80s, and every last one of them at some point or another had that money in oil. And they may have branched off to other stuff, but that money's either in oil or they were selling cars at some point and they just had a bunch of dealerships. But bottom line,
the audacity, the audacity to take the land, to take the oil off that land and to claim all rights to everything that comes from that and not divest it back into the community is so ridiculous. It hurts to think about. And that's the kind of thing that you have to reconcile, that's what these owners are, by and large.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the NFL owners are very old school American capitalism
Right.
very, generational wealth, very old money. The NBA owners are a little more new money. And it's easy to fall into those kind of stereotypes, right? Where it's like the old white guy versus the new kind of hip happening Santa Clara white guy. And to some degree, those stereotypes bear out over how they treat their players. But as Daniel points out last week, and as we are kind of pointing out today, the difference between old money and new money isn't really that different right now. All of them are pretty silent. The new money's pretty just as silent as old money right now. And so as much as it's easy, and I'm guilty of it as well, as Daniel kind of called me on it last week, of falling into those kind of stereotypes of, hey, the NBA is innovative, it's new, it's caring, and then to some degree that's a fact. But in a lot of ways, it's still not old. It's still billionaire white men doing billionaire white man things.
So you're telling me Kyrie's right?
Yes, as much as it us all to think that a flat earther could have good points. He has extremely good points and valid points, and I'm eager to see where they lead to. If they lead to any more owner accountability, if it leads to a player schism as far as will they be able to get on the same page about what they want to do as a collective in any meaningful way. Will they be divided on that issue? It's interesting to see where they're going to take this. But as far as Kyrie holding the owner's feet to the fire on a lot of issues, how they're going to be protected in COVID, not seeing their families, why should I come back and play for you? What are you going to say on these issues? All those grievances, they're valid grievances.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And so it sounds like you guys have.
So we're done, right? All right.
I've warned y'all on this issue. And we actually have a pretty neat little segue. This is a topic I think that Daniel's kind of been keeping up with even a little more than I have. And that's that while we talk about Kyrie holding the owner's feet to the fire, the players who will, they will their own kind of power, but they're actually in a more precarious position to actually wield it, which is why they haven't historically over the years, is the college athletes. The college athletes are starting to get involved in a big way. We saw today Chuba Hubbard holding Mike Gundy accountable for supporting a very extremist right-wing network. Mike Gundy had a shirt on that touted an extremist right-wing network, and he said he couldn't vibe with that. He couldn't come back and play for a man who would wear such a shirt like that. We saw over the weekend.
I have the quote here for you, D, if you want me to read it.
Yeah, go ahead, D.
No.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry.
no, he's good. So for what the picture is basically I think Mike Gundy went out fishing. I think probably with some of his boys. He had on a shirt that the shirt was, like Derek was saying, for OAN, which actually stands for One American News Network. And this rubbed Chuba Hubbard, in the wrong way. The reason being is that
I'm sorry,
the
what?
recent thing since
It rubbed Chuba Hubbard what? I'm sorry.
the wrong way.
To be fair, Chuba Hubbard's a great name.
Yeah, it is.
Continue.
Juvenile.
But yeah, with this network though, they've already been quoted as being very against, Black Lives Matter, calling them, fake, a radical movement, all that kind of stuff as well. So Chuba Hubbard, being himself a black man himself and also an athlete, he pretty much put on Twitter saying, "I will not stand for this. This is completely insensitive to everything going on in society, and it's unacceptable. I will not be doing anything at Oklahoma State until things change." So himself, other current athletes for Oklahoma State, other former athletes for Oklahoma State also chimed in on that as well, saying that, I think they feel that you can have your own views, but when things like are going on right now, you kind of have to be aware of how things look, kind of have some type of self-awareness of who you're working with, who your family is. With, in this case, as a coach, your family is going to be your players. So if your players are going through something that's affecting them, very deeply, you should have some level of awareness about what's going on, and kind of act accordingly to that as well. So he might just grab a shirt and threw it on or whatever, but still, if you're someone who's normally in the media, someone who I would think is pretty educated in terms of hearing him talk and stuff, like, what's going on, what stuff says on your shirt, so you see what's on your shirt when you're wearing it. If you put something on Facebook or Twitter, other people are going to see it all around the world because you are famous. So you should have some type of accountability for what you're putting out there. And yeah, they were pretty much saying that if some things don't change, if we don't get some type of statement or whatever, then I can't say that we're going to be playing next year for OSU because, enough is enough and we need to have some type of answers.
Yeah, and you know what kind of, I mean, the fact that you even have the shirt, it's not like they're so popular.
Ain't nobody handing that, hey man, here you go.
That you just happen to have a shirt, you didn't know what it meant. You have to kind of go out of your way to obtain a shirt of that nature. So I mean, he might try to spin it, but it's pretty unlikely he just happened upon said shirt without knowing anything about it.
Doesn't he wear a mullet?
He came out and said that he
isn't he the
he's
mullet
for the
guy?
mullet, He is,
No,
yeah.
bro. You no. Your benefit of the doubt is out the door.
Hey, you better not be slandering Joe Dirt.
Nah, bro. Nah.
He actually had been quoted saying before though that the reason why he liked the network initially was because, from his words, not mine, that they were pretty even keeled in terms of reporting news. It wasn't too left, too right. It was kind of just the information, and that's what he loved about it when he first saw it. So I guess that's why he went out and got the shirt.
So
I don't know if he's been watching since whenever that happened, because that hasn't been the case for a while now. But that's what he came out and said is the reason why he initially had the shirt in the first place.
So because I've looked into sites like this before because it fascinates me that these sites exist, like almost to the point where it's like, holy shit, people pay attention to this. A couple of things on that. One, when they say it's centrist, when they say it's like, oh, they're giving both sides of the argument, no, they're digesting everything in a way that makes racism palatable. Like I've read these articles and they will literally break down like this is the problem, but isn't looting so much worse and stuff like that. And that's the kind of nuanced critique that these are giving. Like these are not nuanced at all. These are literally just right-wing sites, but they're not literally calling people the N-word. Like that's just straight up what it is. So when you say stuff like that, it's like, whatever, man, you know what it is. And if you don't, then you're an idiot and your players have every right to criticize you on it. But like Derek was saying.
That's probably even worse, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's horrible. Like you should be, that ties into what Derek was saying though. Like for me, this fails so many checks. There are so many ways to stop this picture from being taken. One, don't own the fucking shirt. Like you have to buy merchandise. Like you don't just like I like watching CNN. I'm not gonna buy fucking CNN merchandise. That's not how it works. Unless you just really ride for that network. No, nobody does shit like that.
Or you work for them.
That's what I mean. So there's reasons like that. But like you don't buy this shirt. You believe in it, and then you buy that shirt. Two,
I've never seen a Fox News shirt. Even with all the crackpots that's watching Fox News and I've never seen a Fox News shirt.
Because it's propaganda.
Yeah.
I don't see NBC got a peacock. I mean, you could just rock that, and I never even seen that, dude. Like, nah, man. I ain't buying that.
That's check one. Like, that's the bare minimum. Don't own the fucking shirt. All right. Step two, you've owned the shirt. All right, cool. At that point, don't go out in public with the shirt. Like, if this is a shirt you really believe on, like, if I, like me personally, if I was to go outside and my shirt said something like "White Lives Matter," I would be like, "Hey, maybe this ain't the shirt to wear. If this is truly what I think, maybe this ain't the shirt."
You got a tattoo of that.
But that's what I'm saying. So when you get to the point where it's like, all right, now this shirt is acceptable for me to wear in public, you failed check two. Now you're on like, all right, not only do you fuck with it enough to buy the shirt, now you're actually rocking the shirt in public. And then step three, man, I hope this picture doesn't get taken with me wearing this shirt. You can't tell me he doesn't like think that, this is going to be all of these checks fail. Like you don't get.
Awesome.
Maybe there's 14 or 15 fish on the table.
What was that?
Step 4: don't post a picture with the shirt on. You took the picture.
There are so many ways to prevent people from knowing you're a racist. You know how racist you have to be caught as a racist? Like it's just.
But maybe he thought all those fish that they had on the table that they caught. Maybe he thought the fish would distract everybody's eyes.
It's like blocking the shirt.
Look how good we did, guys.
Your angling skills is not directed anybody to situation that OAN shirt you got on, homie. Nah.
Tell me why it felt like Austin was getting the background around Austin was getting darker and darker.
Just a floating head.
More sinister. I mean, it's dark in here. I don't know what to say.
In the background, dun, 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 dun.
But in addition to that, which happened largely today, we also had the UT athletes as a whole, kind of pretty much an athlete from pretty much every sport came together to write out a list of demands that they wanted of the university, which included taking down Confederate monuments, that are on campus. I know because I've seen them because that's where I went to school. They included renaming some of the buildings that are named after noted racists. I know that those exist because I literally lived in one my freshman year. It was called Simpkins. They've actually renamed that one because that guy was just so racist that they had to do him first. He was so outlandishly racist. They even though they've kept a lot of the other stuff up,
They like,
he
hey,
was
bro.
so bad they changed him. And so, and then they also they were calling for the athletes to stop singing "The Eyes of Texas," which, if you don't know, the Eyes of Texas, it's the alma mater for the University of Texas. It has a very racist history. It was basically performed first at a minstrel show. Its tune is derived from another song that it was performed at a minstrel show that actually has become popularized within culture. It has the tune of "I've been working on the railroad," but what people don't know, and frankly what I didn't know before this happened, is that "I've been working on the railroad" comes from a very it has a very racist past, and it's been kind of desensitized to be able to be palatable for culture over the years. And then the words that are in the song are pretty much derived from statements that have a racist origin as well. There's a lot of good literature online to read about it if you want to get more specifically into why "The Eyes of Texas" is a racist song. But make no mistake about it, it's a racist song. And frankly, I'm behind on this as well. I went to the school for 4 years. I sang that alma mater pretty much after every football game. I had no clue what I was singing, and continue not to know to this day. I forgot the song because I'm not into stuff like that past the point of me being in school. But I had no clue till Saturday when the UT athletes called attention to it. I had no clue just how racist and vile that song and its origins and pretty much every aspect of it are. And I've just been singing it since 2008. I've been singing it and propagating it throughout my life, without any kind of clue of what I was perpetuating. And so what they did was probably very hard, because just because you wield power, and they do wield some power, they don't wield the power that Kyrie Irving wields. There's stuff on the line from them. If they don't have livelihood yet, they have the ability to turn this into a livelihood, which could get stripped away from them at any moment. So they do wield some power, because if they all decide to link together, which it looks like they have, that is where their power comes from. But without that kind of consensus, they can go awry for them pretty quickly, and it still could go awry for them quickly if things are deemed to be unpalatable, and they end up having to make some real sacrifices. But so that came out over the weekend too, and it just kind of it all kind of congeals into this topic that we have today, which is basically the athletes are holding power, or they're speaking truth to power. And so what did you guys, what thoughts did you guys have on this? I know I kind of spoke for a while. I was filibustering a little bit.
Filibuster.
Well, actually, something similar is going on at A&M as well, which is my former school. So we have on campus a statue. We call him Sully. Lawrence Sullivan Ross is the statue. And actually, since I've been to school, they've been trying to get that statue removed as well. But now it's getting more steam. A lot of players are getting behind it as well. So the reason why he has a statue in the first place is that at one point in time, he donated a lot of money to keep A&M going. So that's why we still have the school now. They say he helped also to create Prairie View A&M, which is at HBCU. So like, okay, he's done, good for the school, good for Black people, so he's good, right? It's like, well, no. If you want to look at his history, he actually was a general in the Confederate States Army. He was part of the Texas Rangers. The way he made money was a little bit shady as well, and it turns out he might have been profiting off of things like slave trade and such as well. So even though people try to clean it up on one side, saying that he's done good X, Y, and Z, it's like, okay, that's fine, but that still doesn't mean he deserves to have himself being glorified, for all of eternity in the middle of a campus. So that's going on. That's kind of close to home for me. But I think, it's kind of the thing that's been brewing for a little bit. You kind of saw it with the whole, players trying to get paid for their likeness, deciding to skip ball for going to the G League, stuff like that. More and more players are kind of being aware of what kind of power they actually do hold. And it's also doing that same thing for football as well, because before there might be repercussions if one or two people says it, but if the whole team is like, hey, no, we don't like this and want you to change it, I mean, they can say, okay, we're not going to change it. Y'all can suspend it, whatever. But it's not only going to hurt them for those players, but also for further players in recruiting. Because at some point in time, basically, this is going to be it basically is going to be just that they need these players to come play for them, and they're going to do whatever it takes to get them. How it's been so far. So far, the players didn't know that that meant that, yeah, they actually may change their views on things or do different things or change people in power because they want to win because y'all make them, they make them so much money.
Yeah.
So at some point in time, the players are starting to realize it's like, yeah, me, before I'm even on campus, I have a lot of power that I can wield. When I'm on campus, I have power that I can wield. When I leave campus as a former student, I still have power that I can wield as well. And it's kind of amazing to see that it's all at once coming out to where players are starting to step up and starting to understand, like, okay, you know, we actually can influence a lot of things because we make this whole thing run. And if we stand together, then yeah, you pretty much either have to do what we say, or some school is going to do it. We're going to go to that school instead, and then they'll have all the good players. They'll make all the money. They'll win all the games. And at some point, your fans can be like, hey, we want to win games too, so y'all might want to take down these statues or, you know, do something or pay them or something or whatever because we hate losing every year. So.
Well, not only
It's
that,
interesting.
but alumni,
just
right?
Super quick, Charles, because I want to throw it right back to you, but real quick on that, what does it take? Like, somebody's got to tell them directly, like, oh, I'm not coming because fuck your statues?
Well,
That's my question, but yeah, go ahead, sir.
that's what I was going to say, though.
Yeah, sorry.
But so going to that, but that's really more or less a starting point. Some 18-year-old kid is going to have to say that. And that's going to be your starting point. But then this is what happens because, well, not even your starting point, because what we're seeing right now with UT and a little bit with A&M, current players are saying something. That's going to lead to recruits. And then next thing you know, hey, what happens when all those guys that came from that college and went to the NFL, they write alumni checks. I know they do. I don't have to have gone to college to know that professional players in whatever league they're in, they write alumni checks to their alma maters. They pay for things because of their pride in their school and because they want the next level of kids that come down the line because of their fan. You know, if you're a UT fan and you happen to have gone to the school and went on to the NFL or the NBA or whatever, and you know that this recruit, that recruit, and that recruit might come to that school and they, hey man, KD, I need you to holler at this kid out in Maryland somewhere that's from your neighborhood that's considering Texas and a bunch of other schools. Now, I need you to talk to this kid. Guess what happens when you have a group of kids that are currently at that school and they say, damn, you guys got these statues and all this stuff, and we're learning about this stuff and we're going to understand about this stuff. And yeah, we're here now, but guess what? If I move on to bigger and better things, I'm not going to tell my kids 20 years from now to come here, or I'm not going to tell the kid in my neighborhood that maybe is considering going to go play football, hey, you should go to this school because I went to this school. It just builds from there. And the thing is that these people that are at these schools don't think that will ever happen. And we're seeing right now proof that it very likely could. And we're seeing the roots of it right now with what we're seeing with A&M and what we're seeing with UT. We're seeing the roots of it kind of spreading out right now. And that's just the beginning. And it really very much could lead to a point where it starts affecting recruiting. It starts affecting alumni money. It starts affecting a lot of things. So that's highly likely. I mean, I can totally see that happen.
And then to answer Austin's question, we're hitting a saturation point, right? Where all these protests, all these this outcry is filtering down to the younger generation, and we've already seen that the younger generation is already a lot more politically minded than even we were, and we were fairly rowdy as a generation when we were kids as well, and so that's as you know, the gap between the boomers and the millennials, they kind of took the time off, but we kind of got back to those roots. And now the generation behind us, Generation Z, they're very, very active. And so there's two reasons. So you see that influence on how social media and what kind of a consensus around consensus building around there and filtering that down. But also, you're starting to get to the point where Mom is listening as well now, and Mom has a lot of influence. So those coaches go in, they wine and dine Mom specifically. Mom wields a lot of power, and mom seeing these images on TV and seeing UNOAN shirts and seeing that you have Confederate statues, and maybe she didn't necessarily care before, but she cares now because she's seeing it, she's hearing it, and she's hearing you don't care, and that's what she cares about. She cares that you care, and that's so when Mike Gundy goes into a household and he says, "Oh, I love your boy. I'm going to treat your boy right. I'm going to raise your boy right." Well, you can't raise my boy right if you have if you have an OAN shirt on. You can't raise my boy right if there's a monument to some racist from the past that didn't even win the damn war on your campus. You can't raise my boy right if you don't feel like Black Lives Matter, even if that's something you've said, but your actions don't show it. And so we see that the generation behind us, they're already a little more socially and politically savvy just because of how media works in this day and age. And we also are likely going to see mothers and fathers get involved and kind of fill those gaps in for maybe kids who necessarily aren't as politically minded and steer them in better directions. And I think that's how the actions of what UT athletes, A&M athletes, Chuba Hubbard, them creating a stir along with, what we're seeing protest-wise is creating enough awareness within the world to start building upon those things. And that's why it's so important to be vocal and to speak out and to use your platform to do these things because it matters. It puts it into the media sphere, and once it's in the media sphere, it's very hard to stop.
Yeah, and one big part of college sports in general is negative recruiting. So these schools look for anything they can to say, hey, don't go over there because of X, Y, and Z. Don't go there because they have a cheap facility. They don't have good weights or whatever. They're not going to pay. They're not going to help you to get money from your likeness and stuff like that. If they can say like, yeah, don't go over there because, hey, did you see this clip about them saying like, yeah, they don't care about these racist statues on their campus. So are they really going to take care of you over there? Are they really family? Are they really for you? Or are they more just want to use you to make the money? So, and that's it. They listen to that all the time, and they hear this every day from multiple coaches all across America. So if you're that, school is going to stand on, yeah, no, these are statues. They're going to be like this. We're not going to change anything. That's, of course, their choice. But a lot of times they try to change a lot of things. They spend a lot of money to avoid having people be able to say, hey, they don't have this, so come over here instead. Because it's really just those top tier players they're trying to get that sway a program, kind of like the whole Kyrie Irving, argument and stuff too. Is like, you want to do what you can to get those top tier players, and you'll try to do what you can to entice them. And if there's something that's like a glaring weakness for you, you're going to try to correct it, or you're probably going to miss a lot of players, which schools definitely don't want.
Well, I mean, you think about, it's funny because I can think of 3 quote unquote power conferences right now, Big 12, SEC for sure. They got some moves to make because I don't know if there's a school that doesn't have a Confederate statue or building named after it or something. I'm trying to think because I'm not 100% sure on every school, but like when I think about at least just those 2 conferences, I can automatically think that pretty much every school probably has something that they need to probably get rid of that could affect recruiting when they're going after certain players. ACC probably a little bit too. And not to just make it a South-North thing, but let's be realistic. That is exactly what it is. There are some schools that are in certain regions of the country that bottom line is they love to slap a Confederate loser's name on half of the buildings in the city, much less the college. So there are definitely some schools and in a handful of conferences that got a lot of work to do, because it is probably going to affect recruiting. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. I mean, we've already seen some stuff right now, but it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out over time though.
This whole Southern pride thing has always kind of miffed me. I never really got it because you lost, you're a loser, and like you're on the wrong side of history. Everyone knows that. Almost anyone who's not, just virulently racist knows that they were treasonous. It's treason,
right?
And you lost the war. So at least because the founding of this country was founded on treason, but at least they won. So they got to escape their treason. You lost. You couldn't even do the thing that that your forefathers did and win and escape your treason. So you just had to be held accountable, which is another thing that kind of in history the North is kind of let off the hook for not
Yeah,
really.
they were never held accountable. That's the point. Like,
they never held the South accountable for treason, and they just kind of let the South do whatever they wanted. And Reconstruction was kind of shitty, and so instead they put a new apparatus of Jim Crow laws in effect and that kind of stuff. But in addition to that, it's always under the guise of Southern pride. Well, it's like, well, black people are part of the South as well. So how can you tell me it's Southern pride when you're literally flying in the face of that by A, celebrating losers, which we know this country hates to do, and B, alienating a whole group that makes up a good portion of the South and has helped build and
we
continue
built it. We built it. We built it. For free.
For free.
For free.
And so this whole Southern pride bullshit has always made me mad. It's like, well, it's not Southern pride, it's white pride. And it's not even white pride, it's
Right.
treason pride. So it's like, I've never gotten the whole we have to hold on to this because it represents a portion of our history or whatever. So does slavery. You can't wait to tell me why I shouldn't care about that. For Germany, so did the Nazis. They had a whole history. But, we actually held them accountable, and they held themselves accountable, and they erased that part of the history. Why have we not done the same with the Confederacy? Why would we ever celebrate the Confederacy?
Some of these Nazis are still going to jail now. Like 75, 80 years later, there's still dudes going to trial because they found out that they were Nazis. Like, yo, the old man that lived down the street from me? Yeah, man, he was a Nazi. They picked him up last night. Like 80 years later, like, we didn't do that.
Imagine
like these guys retired to their plantation that some black people slaves built for them. They retired to that joint and just kicked back on the porch. Like, that was it.
Imagine
like, oh man, y'all lost. It literally was like they lost like the NBA game in history. Like, oh, you lost. That's it. Peace out. Dapped up.
I don't know why.
They dapped them up and sent them back home.
It's really not funny, but now I'm picturing like the North and South like doing a handshake line. But they're like doing the handshake line after the game. Like, all right, good fight.
Hey, like they might as well have like dapped up. They might as well just dapped up afterwards. Like, yo.
Maybe next time, homie. You know what I'm
saying? You got this next year.
Hey, come on.
You almost had us, man.
Man, imagine.
But it's really not about erasing history because, of course, you don't have to erase it because we need to understand what's happening. It's just the whole point is you shouldn't glorify something that should be seen as like a blemish on your country. So when it comes to the Nazis, that's not being erased. People still know what it is. You can still go see stuff like that in museums. They still have Auschwitz and all that kind of stuff you can go visit, but it's not actually being. They don't have statues of Nazis and like a school. Or at like Capitol Hill, or they don't fly swastikas all over the country. It's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. We're not proud of this. We're ashamed of it, but we won't forget it. Right. So that's why it's like it doesn't really connect.
Imagine having a statue built for you solely because you were a Nazi. Like, imagine that. That's crazy, right?
It's like, but he was a Nazi, but then he did some good later on. It's like, whoa, no. It's like, I don't care. First off, if you're still alive, you're still going to jail. I don't care how much good he did.
Yeah, well,
like they're literally still holding these cops accountable.
Yeah, I want to touch on like. Well, I'm sorry. I was going to say I want to touch on the whole Southern pride in terms of this and erasing heritage or whatever you want to call it. To play devil's advocate for a brief 5 seconds, because I don't believe in any of the fucking thing I'm about to say. But sorry, little one's here. My bad. Yeah, okay.
Look up.
Whoops. So, anyways, the devil's advocate is that they treat them as like they were courageous warriors fighting for what they believed in, right. And that's what they're worshiping when they talk about this. So here's kind of the bottom line. Pokemon Go has been around longer than the Civil War lasted. 4 years, just over 4 years. Right. That's how short the Civil War is. Like, right. This isn't heritage. This was literally them acting like bitches for 4 years. That's what the Civil War is. It's not some long-standing, like they're trying to erase our history. No, y'all took up arms and lost the battles. Right. And it wasn't like some long, drawn-out thing. It wasn't years of oppression. This was literally y'all being told to not have slaves, and they're like, well, no. And then a Civil War happened. This isn't heritage. Like the heritage of slavery. That's what heritage you're standing up for when you do that. So the whole notion of you're erasing history, that's not fucking history. It's 4 years. It was 4 years.
And it just shows you kind of how prevalent that mindset is and how ingrained it is, to where even though I know what I'm arguing, even I said erasing history when I know that we're not erasing history, because that's not how erasing history works, right? Like they didn't, like Daniel said, they didn't erase the Nazis from their mindset. They did actually quite the opposite. They've held themselves accountable and promised never again, and they've held themselves up to that ideal instead of celebrating treason. Like to Austin's brief, kind of trying to show us what the other side would be saying. They didn't. There's everyone who's ever fought in a war in history believes what they believe. They believe they're fighting for the right reason. That's not good enough. Sometimes what you're fighting for is shit, and luckily you lose, and then we get to tell you, hey, that was shit. Here are the penalties.
Right.
And instead, you
take this L.
Hold this L real quick. But instead, we've decided that for whatever reason, people who are solely famous, it's not like even George Washington and like an Abraham Lincoln who has his own checkered history and such, at least they are remembered for things outside of some of the other heinous things they did. These Confederate generals are only remembered for their part in treasonous activities. And that doesn't make any sense.
No.
They literally are known for taking that L. Like, what is it? Which one was it? That was it Lee that surrendered? Like the one that he's known for. I'm like, word, you got statues of this dude everywhere, all over the country.
And what's funny about that is Lee himself. One, he knew it was over. He was like, all right, we're done. We're gonna have to do this now. And two, he himself was very public about like, no, like the Confederacy needs to die because I believe in America over the Confederacy. And that doesn't seem to fucking matter.
Right.
Because no, it's not about history. Yeah. It was never about history. I mean, it was about history, just not the good parts of it.
In other words, we tried it.
Remembering shitty ideals in history for history books, not for statues.
Also, all those statues went up because of the Daughters of Confederacy. I mean, you can look it all up. Daughters of Confederacy put up all these really shittily made statues right when Jim Crow era laws were passed, because they wanted to enforce Jim Crow era laws. Right. They weren't built because of the Confederacy. Like I said, it was only 4 years. They didn't have time to make statues.
How many years later was it? Like some of them were in the 1920s.
Or even later than that, yeah. I mean, people just threw them up.
Some of them statues went up in the 1920s and beyond, and it was about, hey, you see this right here? Watch yourself, because
Tennessee,
we can do this again, homie. Like
Tennessee's Capitol Hill has a statue commemorating a KKK member. Yeah,
the Forrest dude, right?
Yeah, he's an ex-KKK member,
and they're legit fighting right now. They're claiming that they're going to replace it maybe with Dolly Parton,
baby.
And I'm like, hey, I'm with it as long as it's 9 to 5 Dolly Parton. But the point I'm making is, okay, is that another reference?
No. I'm down with Dolly Parton everywhere.
So anyhow, my point is, I'm with that because she probably represents the state probably better than just about anybody in the world probably would at this point, other than Shorty Black from Hustle and Flow. But that being said,
nah, I'm not giving him that one. I'm not giving him that one.
Hey, but man, I remember when your music used to shake the
existence of statues.
Shorty, what happened to you, dog? What happened to you, Shorty? What happened to you, Shorty? Hey, man, I'm just saying. We miss you, homie.
We miss you, but come home, Shorty. Come home.
Come home, man.
But like the existence of statues to me, it doesn't even matter. Like I personally don't even really care about statues, but the sheer fact that a KKK guy has a statue.
Yeah. And they're debating removing it. Like
it's dumb, man. There was one other thing I was going to bring up when we were talking about it, because I just wanted to run through it super quick. When Derek started it, almost when we started this part of this talk, we were talking about that we've reached a saturation point. I don't know personally if it's just because I'm getting older and I'm seeing things more and whatever, or maybe the times are changing in the sense that there is that saturation point where people are now more aware of everything. But like almost every facet of American life is steeped in some form of discrimination, racism, anything like that. whether or not it's innocuous now, or if it has like more sinister meanings. Like I shared something with Derek the other day that I went back and looked for because we had joked not too long ago where Derek had learned what when you say you've been gypped, like you've been gypped, like everybody's heard that phrase. Well, that literally means you've been treated like a gypsy took something from you, which to an American that doesn't really mean too much. But basically, gypsies are an ethnic people, and it's saying that you've been treated like you've been acting like a gypsy, basically.
Right.
And that's ridiculous, but it's now part of American culture. It's now part of language.
Gypsy is a racial slur for Romani people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I'm saying it willy nilly, but yeah.
I was citing the context because that was the context around why saying gypped is bad, because gypsy is not like gypsy is like black. It's like the N-word. So,
yeah. Oh, it's a slang term. It's a derogatory slang term. Exactly. So like I found a list of it, and like I'm just gonna read a couple of them to you because this is shit that I didn't even know. But when you hear a word like the grandfather clause, where something gets grandfathered in, I didn't know the origins of that word. Apparently, it came from like even something more heinous I can imagine. The grandfather clause was a rule that was passed back in the late 1800s, where for you to vote, you had to prove that you had 4 grandparents in this country. Black people couldn't do that in 1895. So the whole point of the grandfather clause was literally to alienate black voters. Now, fast forward 100 years, now it says like to grandfather something in or whatever. Like this is just everyday language.
We literally have that language in our contracts at the insurance company.
Exactly. Like now it's innocuous. Like, you know, it doesn't mean what it did.
Yeah.
But like that's how language works. And then like some other ones that just popped out to me, being sold down the river. I mean, that one's blatant. But literally, yeah, like you say that frequently. Even
you ain't got to explain that one, bro.
No can do. Apparently, no can do was because people were making fun of the way Chinese people talk because it's broken English. Wow. It's like, oh, no can do. No can do, boss man. Like shit like that. Wow. Like that was literally to make fun of Chinese people. Long time no see, making fun of Indians, Native Americans. Sorry, wow. Native Americans. Like that's the kind of shit that's just part of everyday language. So like as I get older, like I'm learning all this shit. And it's just crazy to me. But I think it also is information. It's more readily available now. Like we've reached that saturation point where people are starting to realize, yeah, everything's pretty fucked, and you have to actively work to get rid of that. Otherwise, it's just going to stay the way it has for the last 100 years, 200 years, 300 years. I mean, nothing's going to change. So that's just something, like, I always find language fascinating anyways, but that was just something that came up when you were talking about that saturation point. Like, to me, I mean, it is. People's moms are now talking about George Floyd. Like, that's the kind of shit that's changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to your point, you know, this, like I said, this weekend, I've been working on the railroad. I would never have silly thought about it. Sometimes I've been working on the railroad because it's just a tune that gets in my head, steeped in racism. So it's like, it's all around you. You just have to look. And now there's more places than ever to see it. And there's more people than ever to make sure that you see it, which ultimately was Austin's point. So any last words on this, about the college athletes, or, even the Confederate statue? We didn't even get to the part where NASCAR seems to be the most progressive sport in America right now. We haven't even gotten to that part. So
NASCAR, baby!
We're all going to be NASCAR fans soon enough.
Shout out. So the guy who came out against NASCAR, the one that said he's quitting NASCAR, this blew my mind when I heard this. His name's Ray Ciccarelli. So, shame on him. All the shame on him. But his name is Ray Ciccarelli. Yeah. His name is Ray Cis. Like, that's that dude. That's that dude's name.
Nah, but you know what's funny is Bubba got in. Bubba Wallace got in a little. It was a jab. He didn't even try to disguise it. But they asked him about the guy, and Bubba Wallace was like, "I don't think I've ever competed against a dude. I don't even know who that dude is." like he literally was like, "I don't even know who that cat is, bro." Like,
you made him up.
Because they said, like, "What do you think about your competitor, Ray Ciccarelli?" And he was like, "Well, first of all, I wouldn't even call him a competitor because I've never raced against him, and I don't know who he is." And I was just like, wow. So he made very clear that this dude had absolutely no standing, and which is why it was like he may have got his 15 minutes, but other than that, like, nobody gives a crap what this dude thinks.
Yeah, they're like,
oh yeah, that was wonderful. I mean, I'm just so glad he entered himself into the conversation. It was worth him having his 15 minutes of fame, just so that everybody could flame the fact that nobody knows who the hell he is. Like, it was just it was so awesome. He probably, his dad probably owns a dealership somewhere, and he was like, "Hey, I'm gonna put some money in, we'll build you a truck, and he'll go and do some stuff.
Get him on a racing team.
Oh, and kind of random. Derek, did you know that at UT the players are required to sing the fight song? Did you know that when you were at school there, that they had to sing it?
They always did, so it never occurred to me that it just wouldn't be a thing that they just wouldn't do, because I didn't know. Apparently, the athletes, and it's strange to me that I covered this and I was oblivious to me. Honestly, shame on me, but it was strange to me that apparently the athletes who've come through have always known that, or for the most part have known that this is a racist song. And so, of course, they would have to be made to sing it, because once you figure out what it's about, you would never sing it. And so, I didn't know, because, when you think of it as just this normal, like, fight song, you're like, oh, school spirit, they're just singing it because they have school pride. When you know the origins, now all of a sudden, it makes sense that they have to force some of the people to say it, because why would I sing it if I know what it's about?
Right.
Wow. Yeah, 'cause I saw that in their list of, like, things they wanted to have changed, like, don't have the players required to sing it. I was like, why would you require your players to sing it? I was like, what in the world? Because I know at A&M, I don't see the players sing it, so I was like, I don't think it was a requirement anywhere. But that was kind of strange when I saw that on their list from the players. That's wild, man.
And so, I mean, there's a real come to Jesus moment for me on Saturday.
Hey, man, life is learning.
Yeah.
So any more shout outs to Bubba Wallace, or any more shout outs to we want to get to on this topic?
I'd like to hand out an award. We can make this a part of the podcast if we want, but I'd like to hand out an award. I'm gonna start calling the I Said What I Said award. And I'm handing it out this week to Greg Popovich. He did a New York Times interview.
He doubled down
with Maureen Dowd, and he basically said, the team came to him and said, hey, we're losing season ticket holders. And he basically told the team, I said what I said. and ain't looked back since. And as you notice,
there ain't no shortage of people getting those tickets.
Yeah, he's got progressively more outspoken. I think he's always been outspoken, but as far as like the media is helping, because they're asking him questions that they know he's going to riff on. And he's basically, like I said, if I'm happy to give this award out, take about 2 minutes to give this award out every week. I will happily find somebody to give it to. But if this is going to be the first I Said What I Said award, it's going to Greg Popovich this week, because he said what he said. And
he pop, baby.
Pop out here spitting knowledge.
We can also,
he was coming for Roger Goodell, the NFL. I was like, this dude was crossing sports to make people out. Like, dang.
He came for everybody.
We could also have an award in that same vein that could also go to Pop. Call it the Good Guy White Guy Award. Look at this good guy white guy.
The ally award or what?
He's an example. He's literally he's the ally example right now. Like this is somebody that literally learned, learned how to actually be a part of the solution and made himself a part of the solution.
It feels to me like he's just reaching that point where he's just done with it, man.
Yeah. It's an underlying narrative in this. But yeah, I mean, everybody knows he's at the end, of an illustrious career. But that's why I brought up the fact that this started several years ago. And even then, of course, he's on the back end of a brilliant career. But that being said, it's obvious that he got to a point where he was like, it was almost like, what they gonna do? You know what I'm saying? Like that last trip was in 2014. What they gonna do? Like,
I feel like we've. I feel like we've all hit that breaking point at some point. Like I know I for sure have, where it's just like at a certain point, it's like, man, fuck y'all. It's just how it feels. It's like why am I wasting my energy with y'all?
Well, it's exactly what you need from an ally that is white, which is that Greg Popovich has a certain amount of power, like we've been talking about with Kyrie Irving. He is not going to be fired. He's going to be able to do things on his own terms, and he's using that power. He's wielding that power to speak out and to be a voice and to try to rally people around his cause who are of his same persuasion. He talks a lot about how white people need to do more, and that's kind of been his rallying cry for a while, that white people aren't doing enough, and he stands by that. And so as much as it's actually a good thing to it fits in perfectly with the episode, Terrell, because we've been talking a lot about people in positions of power and people in coaches who don't care have shown an aptitude not to care about their players, and Greg Popovich is showing the opposite of that. He's showing what you should be doing and how you should be approaching these issues and things of that nature. So he's actually the perfect foil to a lot of what we've been talking about, which is, white people who are in power not caring, and he cares, and he shows it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Way to go, Pop.
So on that note, I guess we'll go to the greatest segment in the history of the land.
And all the land.
Yes, sir.
Is this your king?
Derek,
Awesome.
Derek, I heard that you got somebody to take the task today. Is there something on your mind, Derek?
Yeah, there is something on my mind, Austin. Thank you for queuing me up, sir. Well, first, I was gonna flame Mike Gundy, but I think we flamed him already. I don't think I specifically flamed him, so I don't think I need to continue to flame him. Care about black people, you recruit them. It's pretty simple. Care about them. Don't wear stupid shirts.
Yeah.
Let him
live, D. Let him live right now. Let him live, man.
Yeah. I'll take him off the grill. Well, he's on the grill, but I just won't continue to grill right now.
You got him on that upper. You got him simmering up on top.
He's on that one up top. Where
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm calling Ed right now. I'm putting Ed. No one for your list.
Yeah, add him to the Trey Blanco grill. I'm sure Ed will get to him later. I have a little brief something for apparently people who would watch SpongeBob SquarePants, but
Who lives in a pineapple under the sea?
would apparently take exception to the fact that he could be gay. Over the weekend, because it's Pride Month, Nickelodeon showcased some of their characters who would be allies and or a part of that community. And SpongeBob was a part of it. They didn't specifically say that SpongeBob was gay, but SpongeBob, according to the creator, is asexual, so he fits into that community and also would just be an ally because that's how SpongeBob SquarePants gets down. We know what the show is. We've seen the show. We know what it's about. SpongeBob very clearly an ally and is also asexual, so he's a member of the community. And apparently, there's just outrage that a cartoon character would deign to be gay in front of their children. And they don't understand why we have to know what kind of preferences SpongeBob has because it's a kid's show. And it just underlines one of the major problems in this country that people view sexuality and sex in a straight line. That you can't have focus on sexuality without propagating sexual acts, which is absolutely not the case. And we know that's not the case because we watch heterosexual people kiss and be in relationships all the time on television.
Yeah.
In children's cartoons. And nobody says anything about them, but that doesn't have any, that doesn't have any chance of turning a child gay, as we know people think that you can just be turned gay by the media. And so for anyone who thinks that SpongeBob SquarePants, who is not gay, but if he was gay, that is somehow a problem to your child, you're a ridiculous human. You have ridiculous thoughts. Educate yourself. Support your children because, unfortunately, the likelihood is that you're probably raising someone of the community and you're raising them poorly, and that just sucks because kids deserve to be loved and they can't even be themselves in front of their own parents, so be better. So flames to you. I'm going to send you over to the Ed White.
Flames to you.
Oh, you're on the group.
Flames.
I want to piggyback off it real quick because I got three things to say to that. One, real quick, in a quick hitters, real quick. One, it reminds me of a great joke that I heard. It's not even a joke. I mean, it's really sad because this is this guy's reality. But he said, I remember one time I was practicing eyeliner in the mirror. My grandpa caught me, and he made me use a chainsaw for 4 hours in the backyard to toughen me up and get out of there. And he said, so now I'm gay and know how to build a log cabin. So that's the reality. It's like, all right, cool. You're homophobic.
That's the origin of the log cabin Republicans.
Hey, there you go. But that's that whole mindset. It's like, you got to get the gay out of them, and it's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. But two, you shouted out Gabrielle Union recently, and everything that Proud Voices are doing to stand up, especially here in Pride Month. I mean, it goes a really long way, and especially because something that has been kind of a bubbling topic for a while, and I think it's ready to kind of reach over that peak is trans rights, because at the moment trans people still are not viewed the same as even gay people, and it's just the reality. Like there's people being left behind. So I think it's super important that you've got stuff like Nickelodeon showing out for any community, but specifically for the LGBTQ community, doing their thing to support. Like at the end of the day, making SpongeBob part of that is just opening up that avenue for more kids, and it just goes from there. And then 3, because you teed me right up into it, and because I won't shut the hell up about it, and I'll never shut the hell up about it. Y'all need to watch Kipo, because this is a show with zero protagonists that are white. Every member of the show is a POC in some way, shape, or form. One of the characters is straight up gay. He says he's gay in the 6th episode. It's not even a thing. He's just like, oh no, I'm gay. That's it. Like, that's the end of that. Like, they don't talk about it. They don't code it. They don't do things like, oh, he might be. No, he's just, this is me. This is who I am. And throughout the entire show, this is how it is. But what stood out to me most is that I was deep diving kind of into the music for this new season right here, and I posted about it not too long ago. They have a song on their soundtrack that is a trans woman rapper. I don't think anybody could name a trans woman rapper, let alone one that spits fire like this one right here. So the whole show is about representation. And to tie it to what Derek's talking about, like, that representation, like, it's so refreshing to see, because it's a show where literally every single character in the show is not your cookie cutter character. Like, they're their own thing. And that representation goes a huge way. I see people, it's really nice to see people just get so touched by it, because at the end of the day, like, I'm me. I don't have to do this. Like, at the end of the day, I can be me. I'm a cis white male. Like, I don't have to give a fuck about nothing. But, like, to see these people who have no relationship support structure to have their representation like that, oh my God, it's just cool to see.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Two animated shows that are on Netflix that are doing good work within representation: She-Ra and Kipo. Both excellent shows. If you have some time, if you're in quarantine and you want to binge some great entertainment that you can watch with your kids, you can watch by yourself, because I watch them by myself because I don't have kids. She-Ra and Kipo. So excellent. Swear by them. She-Ra, unfortunately, it's over.
Was that an ad?
Yeah.
Free pub. Oh, I'll give free pub. Yeah.
I was there for negotiations.
Boy, I'm gonna give free pub to Las Palabras. They got 79-cent chicken tacos today. Oh my God.
What you doing, man?
No, they don't get free pub, man.
79-cent tacos. Oh my God.
Representation on Netflix can get free pub, but not tacos. Anyway, because I got one more person to put on Ed White's grill, to put on Trey Blanco's grill, and that
surprise.
Huh? Oh
surprise.
Yeah. I didn't tell y'all about this one. Brett Kavanaugh. You're back again, and nobody likes you because you're very clearly a rapist. You should not have the seat on the Supreme Court that you have, because you're very clearly a rapist. And now you're going to try to argue against gay and trans rights by saying that words don't mean what words mean. And if you read the dissenting opinion for today's ruling, that essentially said that employers cannot fire people simply for being gay and trans, as 3 employers on 3 separate occasions tried to do. 2 were shot down in the circuit court. One was actually got through circuit court. They were all 3 tried in the Supreme Court. 6-3 decision. With actually Neil Gorsuch of Republican poster boy fame, who was supposed to lead the revolution against abortion rights, actually writing the majority opinion. So that was a shocker for everybody. But of course, Brett Kavanaugh, the poster child for just indecency, had to write the dissenting opinion. He tried to couch it in language that made it seem like he was still an advocate for gay and trans rights. And tried to congratulate them on their hard-earned victories that he has no part in and would like to dismantle himself. But in the end, all this man argued for a smooth 12 pages that I had to read was that we couldn't possibly tell the employers that they can't fire someone for simply being gay and trans, because the Title IX doesn't specifically say that sexual orientation discrimination is in the language of Title IX. It merely speaks about sex as it relates to being a man or a woman. It doesn't speak to who you love, if you love a man or a woman. And so we couldn't possibly decide. This is for the Congress to decide, even though Congress Congress has failed on several different occasions to actually link up the House and the Senate to pass a bill that would guarantee that you cannot be discriminated against for being gay or trans. And so we couldn't possibly take this on ourselves as a court, because that's not what the court is for. And we can't interpret language this way. We have to go by the actual book definition. We can't, use our brains and decide, hey, maybe if you love a man and you're a man and you're fired based on that, that could maybe fall under Title IX because, that's related to sex. We couldn't possibly make those logical leaps because that's just a bridge too far. And now everybody in public is going to think, man, I can't believe the judicial system is going off on its own tangent and trying to make law. They're reinterpreting law. It's anarchy in the streets. And the public couldn't possibly stand for this and fathom this. And it's very clear that he's setting himself up for when he has a chance to make a ridiculous ruling, he can say, well, we saw this overreach in the court on this occasion. So now I thought we had a basis to overreach right now. And I see what he's doing. It's insidious. You're not an ally. You're not a respectable judicial authority. I see what you're doing. You're trying to set yourself up for later down the line when y'all try to undo abortion rights, and you're going to couch it as in, I can reinterpret the law how I see fit because that's what we did here. You're not slick. I'm onto your game. I know others are onto your game. Again, you're not a fan, an ally. You're not any kind of anything for anyone in this country besides white men who like to get away with rape. And so join everybody else. In fact, you can get your own separate grill because that's what you do. You need to burn a little bit. So you get your own separate grill for Brett Kavanaugh and his bullshit dissenting opinion.
He'll get his own grill, man. He's going to get his own grill.
Awesome.
That was what I was trying to imply. So thank you for making it explicit. Awesome. Thank you for that. I think I'm done trying to set flames to.
I don't want to harp on it too much.
Flames.
Yeah, I don't want to harp on it too much either, but you're right. Dissenting opinions are very important because they set legal precedent. Even if it's not the ruling, it sets legal precedent that people can go back and point to. So by doing it, he's getting his own words in.
I feel like Roberts was going the other end of the spectrum. I think he's setting himself up for what he thinks is going to be probably a bloodbath in November. And with him going with the liberals on, I don't know. I know he's supposed to be like the, whatever you want to call it, but I feel like considering some of the decisions he's made on some other things, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he feels like the tide is changing a little bit. And I know they're supposed to not work that way, but I feel like just, noticing, even with Gorsuch, like the two of them, like to me, I don't know. I just have this strange feeling like maybe they feel like, things may not be, the country may not be seeing things the same way they're trying to see them right now here in, the next 6-7 months or so. So I don't know, man, maybe we better start leaning.
No, that's actually a really good point. Cause they're seeing like the way things are shaping up. The way the narrative is going right now is like, okay, apparently Republicans do not like black people, do not like anybody who's not, white or maybe like a white male or something.
Yeah.
And while that might have worked in the past, before, at some point, it's not going to be able to hold out, and it's going to be like a landslide the other way if you don't try to head it off or do something to say, okay, well, maybe Republicans do care about more than just white men.
Yeah.
So I can see that being a factor as well. Just kind of how reading the law, it seems like pretty straightforward, though. It's like, if you fire me because I'm a gay man, but if I was a woman dating that same man, you wouldn't fire me, then that's because of my sex, right? So, it's not even that. It's not even that.
But even Neil Gorsuch was like, yo, no, like, it's about sex.
Right.
It's about the sex of the person. So, and he even referenced Kavanaugh's dissent. It was like, my colleague is going to say this, and basically, honestly, it was kind of hard. He was kind of hard on him because, like, my colleague's going to say this. Basically, it's bullshit. That's basically what he said in legal.
Personally, I've always thought Gorsuch thought Kavanaugh was trash. Something in my head tells me that Gorsuch doesn't F with that dude. Like, I don't know. I have nothing to base it on. I get this impression that the other conservatives on the Supreme Court don't rock with that dude. Like, I just get that impression. He strikes me so much differently than the rest of them, the rest of the conservatives. He doesn't seem he doesn't seem like he's accepted by them. I know that sounds like a weird way to put it, but he just doesn't seem like he's in the same professional standing as them. He just seems like a guy that they knew they could get through, so they just put him out there.
Well, because he's not. And, I mean, he showed himself not to have the
temperament. I mean, look how he acted.
Thank you. And they saw that. They saw that he doesn't have the temperament to be a Supreme Court justice.
Right.
And so I'm sure that colors, even if you're, you know, on the same side as him philosophically, that has to color, you know, your impression of him is that he doesn't have the temperament to do this job. Why is he here? But let's, you know, it was a good win today, and you know, Terrell could be right. You know, we could be shifting towards more wins in the future, but let's not get complacent.
No,
you know, abortion rights are still under fire. If you give Trump another 4 years, they will become under more fire, and he will more than likely be the one who replaces Ruth Bader Ginsburg. If he gets another 4 years. So, you know, there's a lot on the line this election. The Supreme Court and Roe v. Wade is definitely still one of them. So don't think because, you know, Neil Gorsuch is smart enough to know this was a battle he couldn't win and is smart enough to, you know, write the majority opinion on it that we couldn't still see, you know, Roe v. Wade flipped if we don't do the right things and use our political powers as such.
Vote local, vote everywhere. Don't just vote on the president, man. Vote top to bottom, homie. Pay attention.
It all matters. It all matters.
Really
anything else you guys want to say relating to anything before we get out of here?
Fuck Matt Gaetz.
I knew you were going to say that because he did some more. I'm surprised you didn't say anything about him.
I mean,
I'm going to look like the worst dad in the world right now.
I know. Right? I mean, it's all me. But I mean, he out here tried to make it illegal to protest the anthem in soccer.
Yeah, but
come on, man.
Trash. He's only there because his dad. We all know Matt Gaetz.
It was funny is that we're all on camera. Well, not Daniel. Daniel's been smart, and of course Terrell's not. But me and Austin are on camera cursing in front of a child. Everyone can see it. It's going to be on YouTube.
That's all. I was like, what
my mom's not going to be pleased with this episode.
Had you not acknowledged it, we could have put a disclaimer like, yeah, my kid didn't hear any of that.
Well, you can still do it, but not anymore. Not just saying that.
Yeah, no. We can lie to people. It don't matter.
Okay.
We control the narrative.
All right, fellas. Well, another outstanding episode of The Weekend to Take. We didn't have Ed to put people on the grill, but we grilled some folks ourselves. We had our own little grill today, and there are a lot of people on it. So for Daniel Davidson, Austin Brazina.
That's what work on audio. I know. Thumbs up.
Thank you, Austin. And thespian Poppy himself, Terrell Huff, with the unofficial guest of the podcast, Thomas Huff. Yes, that's it. They can't see it either.
Yo.
Indeed.
Thank you. Double it.
Get
him to say indeed. Double ND, triple ND. I am D.R. Lewis.
The third, baby.
Not the third, Daniel. Work on that in the off time.
That's my bad. I'll do right there. I'll do it next time.
Like right there.
Yeah, you'll get it one day, even though it's on the screen.
I thought that was satirical.
I'm
sorry.
Terrell, hit them with the outro.
No. The Weekend to Take, because the week may end, but sports don't.
Goodbye.
All right.